I don't, oh, there's,
And Madam Chair, the meeting is now live.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It is 9 o'clock in the morning, and I would like to call the PEB board meeting to order. With that, I will ask PEB staff to call the roll.
thank you. Laura Freed,
Here.
Linda Fox,
Here.
Betsy Aiello, Betsy, you're on mute. Betsy. We'll come back to Betsy. Don Bailey.
I'm here. I had my sound down. Sorry.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Don. April Caron.
Here. I had my sound.
Michelle Kelly.
Here.
Jennifer Krupp.
Here.
Tim Lindley.
Here.
Marcia Urban.
Here.
Tom Verducci.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 2, public comment. I'll turn it back to the PEB staff once again.
Thank you. For those of you who have joined for public comment, your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number will be announced, and you'll be advised that you may now make your comments. If you're calling in via telephone, please press *6 to unmute. Due to time considerations, each caller will be limited to 3 minutes. Caller with the last 4 digits of 0943. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record, and please press *6 to unmute.
I'm sorry, who did you ask to start?
Caller with the last 4 of 0943, which is you. Please
Okay, thank you very much.
state your name and slowly spell your name. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Janelle Woodward, JANELLWOODWARD, and I'm a state employee and member of AFSCME Local 4041. Thank you for allowing us to give public comment. I wholly oppose cuts or increases in cost to the health and retirement benefits we have earned. Since the passage of the American Rescue Plan, funding has come back to the states and local jurisdictions, and this is great news. Should the legislature restore funding for our health care, and I truly hope they do, I would ask that the PEB board schedule an emergency meeting immediately to take action to restore our health care plans back to what they were prior to any cuts or added costs. We realize the work involved with any last minute changes, but like many of our state jobs, sometimes last minute work is required of us. This is a unique situation and extra effort is required. I fear we will be stuck with whatever cuts have been suggested simply because people involved do not want to take the extra effort to do the extra work required. While we know that healthcare costs go up, these costs to coverage and added costs of insurance are devastating to me as a cancer survivor. Treatment for cancer goes on indefinitely and does not stop at any given time. I'm extremely concerned over these cuts in benefits and increased costs to state employees. I am still paying off medical bills that stem from my original treatment, and they continue to add up. This has already been detrimental to me from the last round of cuts when PEB changed our benefits. Benefits just keep getting cut and costs shifted to employees, which are never restored. During this time of continued pandemic, given the fact that recovery funds have come to the states and local jurisdiction, it is unconscionable that PEB would reduce benefits and increase costs when state employees already have income cut because of lack of diversified tax structure in Nevada. Please, please think long and hard about these devastating effects to state employees. These cuts to benefits, while increasing cuts, will force many to purchase insurance but not be able to afford to use our insurance benefit. Inability to afford to use our insurance could very well result in a death sentence to cancer patients and other patients with or other employees with serious medical conditions. This financial situation is the very same thing that occurred with Obamacare as costs went up and you were unable to afford to use the very plan that you were forced to purchase. I know this from personal experience. Just as state employees serve the public, this board and PEB in general serve the state employees. I would ask that you consider prioritizing state employees and agree to schedule an emergency meeting should legislature restore funds for our healthcare. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 7338. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record, and please press *6 to unmute. Caller 7338, please press *6 to unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Freed, members of the board. This is Priscilla Maloney representing the AFSCME retirees. That's PRISCILLA MALONEY. And I know that these are extraordinary times, and it looks like, as we like to say out in the world, health is on the way. And that is a good thing. I appreciate the complexities of handling the PEB budget in the context of Nevada State's larger budget. But I would like to suggest to the board this morning that the members of the board keep an open mind on some of the creative solutions that have been suggested either in writing or public comment in other hearings and meetings by my coalition partners, the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the UNLV Senate faculty group, and of course the AFSCME actives. There are some creative solutions to some of the dilemmas we seek, and I'm simply hoping that the board will listen carefully to all the ideas and keep an open mind and be flexible, because again, as I said, we all know now, thanks to the signature of our United States President, that help is on the way. Thank you.
Caller with the last 4 digits, 7832. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record, and please press *6 to unmute.
Thank you, Chair Freed and fellow PEB board members and staff. My name for the record is Terry Laird, spelled TERRI-LAIRD. I'm the executive director at RPEN, the Retired Public Employees of Nevada, a nonprofit organization serving nearly 8,000 dues-paying members, most who are retired, although we do have nearly 1,000 of them who are still active and still employed. We realize that the board is not expected to make any budget adjustments today, especially since the state legislature will be considering the PEB budget again early next month. But RPEN is on record as being opposed to the cuts impacting our retired and active members, and are hopeful that careful consideration will be given at the legislative level as well as with the PEB board if and when federal funds become available that may allow restoration of some, if not all, of the proposed cuts. Written and verbal comments for this meeting bring to light the human perspective of what these cuts will mean to our members. We thank PEB Executive Officer Rich for continuing to keep our advocacy groups apprised of PEB matters over the years, but we are very much concerned about the negative impacts that these cuts will have on our members who you have submitted their own comments via email to you outlining what the impacts will be on them. Again, we thank you for your time. Good luck. Thank you.
Caller Douglas Unger, please state and slowly speak your name for the record, and you may make your comment.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G-U-N-G-E-R, UNLV Chapter President, Southern Nevada Government Affairs Representative, Nevada Faculty Alliance. Among actions the PEB Board is charged with today will be rate setting on budget cut plan designs resulting from our state's unforeseen economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The American Rescue Plan now offers mitigation of that crisis, $2.95 billion to state government, aimed at restoring budget shortfalls, which should include making whole the reduced health insurance and benefits this board will probably vote to approve, as though these rescue funds do not exist or may never arrive. Nevada faculty must consider this vote a failure of state government at all levels. Of the governor's office that has not listened to state employees in our appeals for common sense. For example, to allow plan designs with a COVID-19 surcharge added that could be easily lowered or eliminated without much pain or disruption. A failure of the PEB timeline, incapable of flexibility to change bad plans that shift financial burdens to the sickest and most vulnerable, that tax retirees unfairly, that eliminate long-term disability insurance that will thus leave state employees facing unconscionable poverty and hardships should they become disabled, and of a legislature that appears as though it doesn't sympathize with the necessity for adequate health insurance and benefits for essential workers who sustain our state in its daily operations, nor for educators who teach and provide opportunities for advancement and economic progress for our fellow citizens, mainly young people, 108,000 students. For the record, the PEB plans to set rates for today are inadequate compared to what's possible. The process that produced them results from a failure of vision, planning, and willingness of state government to listen to its workers and acknowledge our needs. We are left disillusioned and demoralized. Many of us are angry. These cut plans will hurt us financially. They will erode our well-being and our health. Hiring and retention will be negatively affected across our state, and so this failure will eventually damage everyone. We understand why the PEB board might feel little choice but to approve rates for these failed plans. We request a postponement of this vote, if you can do it, or at least that you should add a statement that asks the legislature to prioritize from American Rescue Plan funds restoration of $25 million in cuts that are most practical to restore for 2021-22, the long-term disability insurance, contributions to retirees, and life insurance. Also to ask for next plan year, an additional approximately $15 million to restore employee health insurance to 2019-20 levels, including premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket maximums. For the PEB board to make such a statement for the record could be helpful to our advocacy to seek redress and mitigation from American Rescue Plan funds. Thank you if you can make such a statement, so that even if still no one listens to the voices of state workers, even if we fail yet again, we may fail better or be afforded that chance. Thank you for your consideration during this sad, frustrating year of such loss and uncertainty. We appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Caller Kent Urban, please state your name and spell your name for the record, and you may make your comment.
Good morning, Kent Irvin, E-R-V-I-N, Nevada Faculty Alliance. First of all, ditto to the previous comments. Good morning, Chair Freed, Executive Officer Rich, and committee members. The state will be getting $2.95 billion with a B in flexible federal funds from the American Rescue Plan. Those funds are meant to compensate for lost revenue to COVID-19, just what caused these cuts to PEB in the first place. Also, PEB is now sitting on excess of reserves of $51 million as of December 31st, projected after the state sweeps back $24 million through its holiday budget cut to still be at least more than $20 million at the end of the fiscal year. The total cash reserves are upwards of $150 million. The cost of fully restoring benefits to pre-pandemic levels is perhaps 25 to 30 million. And there is no good reason to make all of these cuts now, given the influx of federal funds and the excess reserves. The so-called mandatory reserves provide a fiscally conservative cushion for any future claims, including post-pandemic pent-up demand. Reserves alone could be used now to allocate to restore the cuts to pre-pandemic levels, then backfill as needed after the federal money comes in later. This is something that the legislature can do. I would also point to the many written public comments that you have received from your members who are or have been in dire situations. Dropping the long-term disability insurance policy before PEB can even provide a voluntary alternative is unconscionable. The voluntary option will cost employees up to $87 per month to match the current benefit. Although it will be cheaper for younger and lower paid employees, it is still an add-on to monthly premiums for those who can afford it least because they are already living paycheck to paycheck. Dropping LTD insurance means that there will be state public workers who become disabled next year due to an accident or a cancer diagnosis. They are already living paycheck to paycheck and have put their out-of-pocket expenses on credit cards, and then they will be without basic income. They will end up homeless. This will happen. It will happen in an election year. Regarding today's agenda item 8, option 2 is nominally better than option 1 for employees, but it's a false choice between two bad courses of action to drastically and unnecessarily slash health benefits in the middle of a public health crisis. The $4 million cost of supplemental employer contributions in option 2 could instead have been used to restore LTD insurance, for example, which is more in line with your recommendations as board members back in November as fiduciaries to the plan and participants. What we ask today is that you maintain flexibility to restore benefits if and when given direction by the legislature. Thank you.
Caller Kevin Ramft, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and make your comment.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and respected committee members. My name is Kevin Ramft. Last name spelling R-A, N as in Nancy, F as in Frank, T as in Tom. Representing AFSCME Local 4041 on behalf of active state employees. We understand the budget restraints placed on PEB for this upcoming plan year. AFSCME Local 4041 would like to be on record as opposed to benefit cuts and increases to rates during this pandemic. However, we feel that PEB should have a contingency plan in place to restore plan design benefit cuts in full if the legislature provides new revenues to PEB's budget. Further, we ask that PEB call an emergency meeting once legislators close PEB's budget. If it is determined that new funds are available to restore cuts to the next plan year, even if that takes the PEB board making recommendations to pull from the back end of the biennium to fund some of this the biennium for starting July 1st. Clearly, that's an option. If we utilize some of those funds and is restored with the American Recovery Act funds, is an option. There's numerous options here. In the meantime, if excess reserves can be used to lower rates, as in agenda item 8, option 2, then we strongly feel PEB can use its excess reserves to restore most of the benefit cuts. There is no reason to put the burden on state employees and their families when millions of dollars are sitting in PEB's accounts. If needed, an emergency meeting can be called to address this as well. We have concerns with all the plan design benefit cuts being made. We're also hearing that state employees are really concerned about the HMO and EPO having a newly added deductible and coinsurance. This really needs to be restored back to the current state. This is clearly not an HMO as employees know it. They're going to be in shock. They're going to probably select it without even realizing this, go to the doctor, and end up in a situation where they're going to be in debt. There clearly needs to be education surrounding this issue. But ultimately, we hope that it's restored back to the original and they don't even have to deal with it. In regards to the rates being set, we ask that the CDHP rates remain flat to the current year as requested by the governor. We appreciate the board members, the executive officer and her staff for all their hard work. We ask that you look at all options to restore as many cuts as possible, even if it takes delaying the open enrollment. PEB has the money available now. Let's use it instead of putting the burden on state employees. Let us all work together to prevent state employees from becoming an unnecessary debt to them and their families. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Caller with the last four digits 5838, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute.
Good morning. My name is Vicki Rosser, VICKI-ROSSER, UNLV Faculty Senate Chair, representing more than 4,000 administrative and academic faculty members. I really want you to know that we do understand the difficult budgetary decisions you all have to make. But most important is the health and well-being of our employees. These cuts will hurt the most vulnerable, and it will create a major hiring and retention issue. Other words, it makes us less competitive to hire high-quality people the state deserves to have. Moreover, the removal of long-term disability should be a non-starter. Even though individuals have been healthy for 20 years, even if they get sick badly for a year, PEBP proposes to penalize them for it. But it's okay to take 20 years of money from them. For example, 4 years ago, a few gynecologists quit accepting our health insurance, that they went to medical school to be paid higher than $10 an hour. As a result of losing 3 gynecologists in 2 years, an employee became frustrated and quit looking for a new doctor and quit going altogether. 2 years later, the individual was encouraged to go to the UNLV Health Center, where they discovered she had breast cancer with a lump the size of a golf ball. Yes, 20 years of paying into insurance, and when she needed it most, chemo and radiation. Other words, the new proposal would penalize her for the barriers they set up for her health care. Thank you for your time.
Caller Ryan Mitchell, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and make your comment. Caller with the last 4 digits of 3769, please speak and slowly spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute.
My name is Linda Hoxie. I retired in 2009 from the state of Nevada after over 22 years of service. I am eligible to receive the full monthly subsidy of $260 for years of service to the public. I am on several medications which cost quite a bit, and there are medical insurance premiums which must be paid every month. I rely on that subsidy from the state each month to help offset insurance premiums and prescription costs. Reducing that subsidy by $40 per month may not seem like a lot to some of you, but is a gut punch for me. Costs have gone up for seniors too during the past year. According to the Consumer Price Index summary issued March 10th, 2021, food went up 3.6%, gasoline 1.5%, electricity 2.3%, and medical care services 3.0% since August of 2020. I can assure you my pension checks have not gone up by anywhere near those amounts, nor has my Social Security, which strangely always seems to increase by the exact amount of the increase in my Part B premium. I know, right? What a coinkydink. And then to also cut in half our life insurance just seems to me like retired public servants don't hold much value. $7,500 does not go far to pay for final expenses. I respectfully request you maintain our current levels of years of service subsidy and life insurance payouts. Thank you.
Caller with the last 4 digits of 8499, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is Carter Bundy with AFSCME. I don't want to be repetitive of points that have been already made, but what we would really implore you to do is to be flexible and to keep an open mind. Some of the suggestions about using current reserves to, even if you didn't reduce the total amount reserves for the year, you can use some of them now to create plans that restore the benefits that state employees have worked so hard for and that they count on. You can use that money now and then backfill it later. $3 billion in American Rescue Plan money is certainly enough to cover all of these cuts, and it's supposed to be precisely for this kind of expense, for things that were cut because of lost revenue. In particular, I think the EPO HMO plan, having a 20% co-insurance on a plan that is specifically designed for people to choose a higher premium so that they avoid catastrophic costs down the road really doesn't make sense. So we hope that you'll look at that. Obviously, the long-term disability, increasing out-of-pocket max, and the CDHP. There are a lot of things that really affect real people's lives. And again, some of these, if people get really sick or if they have a kid who needs heart surgery, which one of our members may have happen this year, it's the kind of life-changing event that absolutely devastates a family. So we hope that you will be flexible, that you'll really put in the effort over the next month or two to make sure that any revenues that you can get in, whether from shifting reserves right now or from the legislature, that you're able to put that in to plan redesign. And if you have to delay open enrollment for a few weeks, we think that's well worth it. Thank you so much for listening.
Caller, and I apologize, there's only one name typed here. Caller Patillo. Please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and make your comment. Caller with the last 4 digits, 3048. Please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute. Okay, we have an unidentified caller, call-in user. Please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last 4 digits, 5227. Please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and make your comment. Press *6 to unmute. Madam Chair, that appears to conclude the public comment section.
Thank you very much.
I was asked to remind all the panelists to please make sure that you are muted if you are not currently speaking. Thank you.
Thank you for that also. All right, with that, we'll move to agenda item 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brandy Mooneyhan, Deputy Attorney General, for the record. This agenda item is to allow me to make a disclosure on behalf of the board members who are eligible for PEB benefits. Of course, most of the items on today's agenda have an indirect effect on the benefits, but in particular, item 7, which involves selection of voluntary benefits to be made available to members next year, and item 8, which asks the board to consider rates for the 2022 plan year, relate directly to PEB benefits available to members, including the board members. Pursuant to NRS 281A.420, on behalf of the board members who are eligible for PEB benefits, I'm offering this disclosure that they will be voting on those items that may affect the benefits available to them and or their family members. I note that the law does not preclude them from voting on these items. And I would invite any member who has an additional ethics disclosure to make it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mooneyhan. I appreciate that. With that, why don't we move to agenda item 4, the consent agenda, which board members, as you know, is a group of reports, including the minutes and all the vendor reports. And I will accept a motion to accept all of these reports as well as the minutes unless any of you would like to pull any one item under agenda item 4. So.
Yes, Tom Verducci for the record. I'd like to pull 4.4.5.
And this
Okay.
is Betsy Aiello. And I just have a quick comment on 4.3.1. And so I'd like to pull that and 4.3.2. They're just 2 quick little things.
Okay. Whoops, sorry, having trouble muting and unmuting this morning. All right, then we will pull 4.3.1, 4.3.2, and 4.4.5 for discussion. I'll accept a motion to accept everything but those 3 I just named.
Madam Chair, Linda Fox, for the record, I will make that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fox. Do I have a second?
Chair Freed, Tim here, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Lindley. All those in favor, please say aye or wave your hand in your little Zoom box.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Motion passes. So why don't we go back to 4.3.1 and 4.3.2? Betsy, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. And as I said, it's very small. On 4.3.1 on page 1, up at the top, the comparison listed both years as 2020. I have to pull up to it here, sorry, but so let me go back. It's page 1 of the budget report. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to that. Let's see, it's page 23. Hold on. It's hard to scroll, but I didn't want to pull all this out.
Are you reading this? Are you reading this packet online?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
that explains it. That's tough.
Yes.
I always make hard copies. Okay, go ahead.
So it says, shown below is a summary of the operational budget account status of as of December 31, 2020, with comparisons to the same fiscal year in 2020. So I think one of those should be 2021. That's all. Just a minor change unless I'm wrong here. And then that's the only comment I had on the budget report. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. To approve it, I just am asking for that one correction.
Oh, okay. I'm going to ask Carrie Eaton. Does that make sense to you? Sorry, this is Laura Freed for the record. Sorry, Capitol reporters. I always do that to you.
Carrie, you're on mute. We can't hear her. We'll make the correction. Yes, we will make that correction. Thank you.
So, sorry, it was just a minor little thing. And then should I move on to the next CDHP utilization?
Yes, ma'am.
And that one's on page 3 of 8. And I just had a question, again, that it said that within the report, I have a question because it says, I'm wondering how could the plan costs go up if everything else, member numbers, cost per member are down, but the summary said the plan costs went up. And so that's just a question.
So for the record, Laura Rich. So you're saying, so medical cost increase for primary participants. So overall, there was a decrease in the population. This is comparing, quarter over quarter. So I don't know if maybe, do we have Nathan on that can kind of talk about, I think it'll be a good opportunity to have Nathan come on and talk about how utilization has changed in the last several months and year because we've had some conversations about the emergency room visits and why some of these costs the urgent care visits and emergency room visits as well, why they're so volatile through this plan year specifically. And I think that maybe he can speak to what is happening across the board, across their book of business. So if we have Nathan on the line.
And let me see if I can be a little clearer, because on page, page 2 of 8, at the top, it says population decreased for primary, a 1.1% decrease for primary participants. Medical costs was a 12.6% decrease for primary participants, as well as a 12.7% decrease for participants plus dependents. But then on page 3 of 8, it says total plan costs increased 24%. So that's where I got confused. It said the number went down and the cost per person went down, but the total cost went up. So it's a mix between page 2 of 8 and page 3 of 8.
Hi, this is Nathan Meyer for the record. What Executive Officer Rich was referring to. So overall, the plan costs are down on a per member basis, but there are some variances to that due to some of the impacts from COVID. For example, if you look at the average plan paid for urgent care, it's up significantly quarter over quarter. And that is due to the fact that the plan is picking up a much higher share of those costs as compared to prior quarters, due to the fact that we saw a large number of COVID-related visits to the urgent care, which are mandated to be paid at 100%. So therefore, the member cost shifted down significantly and the plan costs moved up.
Okay, that's just where I was confused. If the members dropped and the cost per member dropped, how the overall, but if the urgent care makes up that difference.
Additionally, for the record, Laura Rich, Betsy, there's also a pharmacy component to this. And so we've had a fairly significant increase in pharmacy as well. And so I think this is where you're seeing a lot of the increase. The medical, not so much, but the pharmacy has really contributed to this.
Okay, those were my two questions, and thank you for the time.
This is Laura Freed. You're welcome. And I'll move to Tom and item 4.4.5.
Thank you, Chair Freed. Tom Verducci for the record. I just wanted to point out on section, make sure I got the right section here, 4.4.5. As far as the performance guarantee, we have two guarantees that were not met here. And, in light of the pandemic, I would just like to address, if there was some underlying reason why the performance wasn't met, and if there was a financial performance guarantee tied to that, and perhaps there's a reason why. I can see the call center being delayed with the pandemic, and perhaps we should be somewhat lenient here, but I'd like to just discuss and see why we're having a continued performance guarantee that's not being met.
So thank you, Mr. Verducci. Laura Rich for the record. Yes, thank you for pulling this. We have actually been in discussions recently with Willis Towers Watson, and we do have Chris Garcia on the line available to speak on this. What I do want to point out is, yes, so we have a $0 contract with Willis Towers Watson, and so these missed performance guarantees are not credited from anything that we pay them. They actually would pay for those missed performance guarantees. However, we had a recent situation where, because of a new implementation with a new vendor, specifically our new enrollment and eligibility vendor, there was a need to integrate the Willis Towers Watson file formats and some more integration between the new vendor and Willis Towers Watson. So obviously that comes at a cost to all of the vendors. And there was a cost of $10,000 associated with that move. Willis Towers Watson did agree to waive it in this situation because we had no mechanism really to be able to easily facilitate a payment for that because we have a $0 contract for them. So they did agree to waive that integration fee. They have two missed performance guarantees, and Chris Garcia can speak to why that was, but it's very similar to what a lot of organizations are facing right now. It's workforce issues due to COVID-19. I would propose to the board in this situation, if there is an appetite to waive those missed performance guarantees, which add up to $4,000. I would support that because of the $10,000 fee waiver that they provided to PEB just recently as well, and the fact that there's been obviously across the board some issues with call centers and workforce staffing because of the pandemic. But I will pass this to Chris Garcia if he's on the line, and he can give some more supporting information.
Yes, this is Chris Garcia. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Laura. Again, for the record, this is Chris Garcia with Willis Towers Watson's individual marketplace. Mr. Verducci, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the missed SLA, in particular for the average speed to answer SLA. I know that that's one that was missed. We target for calendar year Q4, which is fiscal year Q2. We target a less than 5-minute average speed to answer. This is our busiest quarter of the year. It's when Medicare open enrollment occurs. I tried to add some reporting a little bit later on in the document. If you can, if you have the report that we provided open to you on page, on the next page down on page 7 of that document, I added some information in there related to Medicare open enrollment plan changes for 2021. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of items in this section of the report for you that kind of leads to hopefully help understand why we saw an increase in call volume, which led to an increase in the average speed to answer for calls that were coming into our service center. What we saw in 2020 was that a lot of retirees were really focused on healthcare due to COVID-19. And you can see this report shows a comparison to plan changes that were made for 1/1/2020 on the right-hand side. And then we also have plan changes for 1/1/2021 that were made during Medicare open enrollment season. The middle row here shows a significant increase in the number of people that made plan changes from one Medicare Advantage plan to another Medicare Advantage plan. You can see for 2021, we had 888 people that made those changes, whereas the year before we had only 247. If you think about the average length of a call for someone who is looking to make plan changes is over an hour, you can see how that significant increase in just that one area would drive longer calls, which then ultimately lead to longer wait time. So it was a very busy Medicare open enrollment season that wasn't anticipated as highly as it could have potentially have been, just because we didn't know what to expect with the impacts of COVID-19. So I just wanted to illustrate that's some statistical data that shows that people were calling in, making plan changes, which drive wait times, drive call volume, and ultimately impacted that service level agreement.
Tom Verducci for the record. Chris, thank you very much. I think in light of the pandemic, and we have a 92% satisfaction guarantee rate. We've had performance guarantees in the past where we have instituted fines with Willis Tower Watson, and I do think that it should be a situation where it is waived, giving the fee waiver that they're currently doing, the satisfaction at 92%, I think should be taken into consideration. And I really do think that this time around it should be waived. And that would be it on my comments.
Chair Fried, I just have a follow-up question, if I may.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, it's a significant increase in traffic for Q4. So what has Towers Watson learned, and what are you going to do next fourth quarter so that this doesn't happen again? Because 8.5 minutes is a long time for a retiree to sit on the phone waiting to have their call answered. So I'm just wondering, what programs or processes you guys have put in place to ensure this doesn't happen again.
Sure. Again, Chris Garcia with Willis Towers Watson for the record. So thank you for the question. So there's a few things that we do each year. So one is there's forecasting for call volumes that's done after the Medicare open enrollment season ends in anticipation for hiring seasonal employees during the summer to get them trained and staffed for the upcoming Medicare open enrollment season. So obviously looking back at 2021 and the increased call volume that we have seen, that's going to impact that staffing from that perspective. Another challenge, and Laura, Rich kind of alluded to this a little bit, we did have some staffing challenges leading up into the Medicare open enrollment season. We were prepared to handle staffing and bring on new available seasonal employees to help with the service center, leading up to the 2021 Medicare open enrollment season. One of the challenges that we saw, though, was that once we went live, our representatives, since many of them were not working in one of our 3 service center locations due to COVID. Many of them were working from home. We had to deal with, basically internet service providers. And so in individual homes, if you can imagine, when COVID hit, in particular for those of us with young children getting on for school, there were a lot of internet issues locally for some people. We actually dealt with that quite a bit, where an individual customer service rep would be online, they would be on a call, then they would lose their internet connection due to bandwidth issues, and that call would end up being dropped. And in the future, we expect to be able to fully staff our service centers and move away from having our representatives work from home. So that should be something that should be a positive impact for the upcoming Medicare open enrollment season for 2022 that we'll have later this year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Laura Freed. With that, board members, does anyone else have any questions for Willis Towers Watson? Okay, hearing none, I would accept a motion to accept with the correction to 4.3.1, the reports under 4.3.1, 4.3.2, and 4.4.5.
Chair Freed.
Yes.
This is Laura Rich. I think on 4.5, we also need to add a motion as to whether or not we are going to waive the fees or not.
Thank you for that.
This is Betsy. I make a motion to accept the reports of 4.3.1, 4.3.2, 4.4.5, and I'll make a second motion or expand this to waive the fees for the performance indicators.
Okay, do I have a second?
Linda Fox, for the record, I will second that motion.
Thank you. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, great, motion carries. With that, we can move on to agenda item 5, which is an informational item.
All right, for the record, Laura Rich. This is the executive officer report that provides the board, participants, public, and other stakeholders information on the overall activities happening at PEB. Implementation and open enrollment. So this is, I cannot stress enough how hard staff is working right now. There's a lot of activity and tasks involved with open enrollment. On top of that, we have an eligibility system transition that is happening, and that is, I don't know if that is ever pain-free. That has been a very difficult and heavy lift on staff because it is a lot of work. On top of that, we have legislative session. So we're getting hit with fiscal notes, and there's a lot going on at PEB right now. We're trying to get all of the notices. I know communication was mentioned in some of the public comment, and how communication, the use of the plans and the changes in the plan design needs to be communicated. We are working very, very hard to develop communication. All of this is in the works right now, not just for the plan design, but also for the network changes as well. There's a lot going on that needs to be communicated in a very short period of time. And so PEB staff have been working very, very hard through this process to make sure that we can meet the open enrollment deadlines in time. We also have a lot of new contracts that are being implemented for the start of plan year 21. So staff have been preparing not just those implementations, but also the solicitations that have been or that will be released throughout the course of the next several months. That is also a heavy lift for staff as well, because these contracts are, or these solicitations are very complex and require a lot of time. So that has, I want to take this opportunity just to not just to highlight how hard staff is working, but also to thank staff, because everyone has just stepped up to the plate and offered to just be part of the team, and you know what needs to get done, and they've stepped up to the plate and have done what it takes to get there. So I have to thank staff for that. I also, our vendors have been amazing. You know, there's all the fiscal notes that come in from, and for those board members who are not aware of what a fiscal note is if there's any legislation that is released that may impact your agency, in this case PEB, we receive a fiscal note request to do an analysis on what kind of fiscal impact it will have on the program. And so with PEB, it's not always cut and dry. We require a lot of help from our actuaries, from our TPA, from our pharmacy vendor. And so there's a lot of work that goes into this analysis. And our vendors have been there to provide this in a very, very small window of time that we are given to produce these fiscal notes. So I want to thank our vendors too for the support that has been given and provided throughout this very, very busy time. Legislative session. So obviously that is in full swing now. I just talked about the fiscal notes. There's a lot of legislation that is trickling in. A lot of those deadlines were extended. And so we are still seeing new bills trickle in. We also have a PEB budget closing that is tentatively set for April 6th. So that we have been providing all kinds of information and data to the committee that has been that has been requested of PEB, and so they have a lot of information about LTD policies and any kind of HRA, anything that they've requested. We've been providing information to that committee, so they are very, very well versed. PEB staff has also been in very close contact. Given the budget situation that we are in, we've been in very close contact with LCB staff as well to ensure that everyone is on the same page and everyone has the same information and is educated on the PEB budget and situation that we may be our unique fiscal situation that we are facing this year. Additionally, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the federal stimulus. I know there was a lot of public comment about this. So in 2020, PEB received about $5.7 million in CARES Act funding. And we were requesting this funding because we didn't know where we were going to sit. If you recall the matrix that Aon put together, COVID costs versus claim suppression. And there was a worst case, best case scenario. We didn't know where we were going to land on that. And a lot of it depended on the actions that the state took as far as shutdowns and things like that. And so long story short, we actually came out ahead. We had higher claim suppression than we had in claims COVID related cost. But we still received that $5.7 million in CARES Act funding, because it was requested. And at the time, we did not know where we were going to sit. Now that we are in a different fiscal situation and we are seeing that we have a very significant claim suppression that is continuing, there's still CARES Act money out there. The feds did extend that CARES Act deadline. I think the day before it was supposed to expire, they decided that it was going to be extended through 2021. And so there's still an opportunity to allocate CARES Act funding. But because PEB is in a situation where we do not, we currently don't need that. Because of the claim suppression, we are accruing excess, and that CARES Act funding is finite. That CARES Act funding can be earmarked to other agencies or organizations within the state that can use that money today. And so in some conversations between the governor's office and the governor's finance office, it was decided that PEB is no longer going to be requesting CARES Act funding, and that money can be more appropriately provided to other agencies that can use it today. So conversely, PEB will be applying for the reimbursement of vaccine-related costs, which are projected to be in the vicinity of $1 to $2 million throughout the end of the fiscal year. So we will be asking for FEMA funds. We don't know if this will be approved or not. These funds are more restricted and they're not finite. They're not dedicated to certain. It's not like PEB, or it's not like Nevada got a chunk of money through FEMA. This is not it's different than CARES Act funding. So it wouldn't be taking away from another agency or another organization that needs it. Additionally, it would be potentially establishing precedents. Is this a cost that that other states could apply for? So this is something that we will be applying for, but we don't know if it'll be approved or not. The American Rescue Act. So this is something that has been mentioned in public comment. This is the most recent federal stimulus package that was passed by Congress earlier this month. We've already had some conversations with the governor's office and the governor's finance office, but there is a lot that remains unknown at the present time. I know that the state is working with the Treasury, and not just Nevada, but all states are working with the Treasury to figure out how these funds can be allocated. So PEB is unable to plan according to funding we may or may not receive. We hope to have some kind of guidance by summer as to how these funds will be allocated, but at this point, PEB is unable to confirm or even plan around having a certain amount of funds, because we don't know if that number is going to be zero or if it's going to be more than that. And so we're put in an unfortunate situation where we have to establish Plan Year 22 plan design and budget and move forward, because we are in a very, very tight timeline in order to meet these open enrollment deadlines. And as most of you know, once the plan year starts, it becomes very, very, very difficult to make any significant changes to plan design, because that changes the potential election. So if a member enrolls in a plan and then you go and change that plan design 2 months later, that may have not been a plan design or a plan that they wanted to enroll in. And so there's federal requirements, state requirements that limit PEB's ability to make changes after a certain period of time. So PEB does not have the luxury of delaying Plan Year 22 decisions until we have more information. As sitting on our hands it would be a big risk to the program at this point, because we don't know when the information will start to trickle in. At this point, it's still at the federal level. It has not even gotten to the legislative level. And so I just don't see this happening anytime soon. And planning under the assumption that we will get money is not something we can do at this time. So I will stop there and give board members an opportunity to ask questions.
Chair Freed, this is Marsha Urban. I have a question for Laura Rich. What is the latest that we can actually open up the open, whatever they call it? I'm blanking now. But what's the latest? I mean, how long can we push this off and still be legal?
So technically, Laura Rich, for the record, technically there is, I know that there are state requirements. There's NRS that requires PEB to notice within 30 days of open enrollment. And so that is something that in the past, when we've pushed out open enrollment, the legislature has waived. So typically we have open enrollment, starts May 1st, ends at the end of May, last day of May. That gives members a month to look at the, to review plan design, to review the changes and decide what or if they would like to enroll in another plan. In the past, because of a delay in rates or something like that, because you do, obviously rates are important. If you don't have rates set, people don't know what the cost of their premium is going to be. And so regardless of what the plan design is, they want to know what the premium of that plan is going to be. And so you have to have rates. So in the past, there's been a delay in rate establishment. We haven't been able to approve those rates in time. And so we've shortened the window from a month to 2 weeks. The last 2 times that we've done this, there have been very, very minor plan changes. And so it wasn't, I'm not going to say it wasn't chaotic, because it was. Our call center gets flooded when, we get all kinds of calls coming in asking, when are rates going to be available? When is open enrollment? People get confused. And so I'm not going to say it wasn't chaotic, but it wasn't as chaotic as it could have been because there were no changes, right? The plan design remained pretty stable. And so there were members knew what they were getting into when they enrolled in a plan. So the 2 weeks, although not ideal, it worked. In this situation, I would not recommend a 2-week window because of the major changes that have happened in the, in plan design. It would be very unfair to members to say you have 2 weeks to figure out your healthcare, and especially during this situation. So plan design itself, and that's deductibles, out-of-pocket maxes, copays, HSA, things like that. That is all built into plan design. That's also part of the overall rate. So any changes to plan design changes rates. And let me back up. The reason we establish rates at the end of March is we have the most time to for Aon to use for experience and trends. So the most utilization throughout that plan year, the time of that plan year. But we also need to load those rates into the enrollment eligibility and enrollment system. And so those rates, our vendor takes a week or two to load those rates, and then staff internally test those rates. And so we have staff that go in and actually go in and test it as every single scenario that we can possibly think of. We go in and test them to make sure that the rates are working out. So, and I mean, you can think of a million different scenarios because there are people, it depends on where you live, your geographic location, and what plan comes up, whether the HMO comes up or the EPO comes up. You also have for example, let's say that there's an employee with with a family, or an employee with an unsubsidized dependent, or, whatever it is. We have to have all those scenarios and we need to test them. So that takes a couple weeks as well. If we don't have rates by the end of March, it will definitely shorten the time frame that open enrollment happens. So anything that rolls into rates, which is anything in plan design, that would affect rates. Now, there's an opportunity for, let's say we do get funding of some sort in June. At that point, that funding, there's certain things that could more easily be reinstated at the last minute. So long-term disability, life insurance, HRA, those are, as long as it is just covered with a one-time funding for the biennium, those are typically rolled into rates, but we can allocate funding just for that. And it's an admin load. It's not necessarily part of the plan design premium. And so those are more easily dealt with after the fact. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of moving parts to that. So it gets very complex.
Marsha Urban for the record. So what you're saying is if we do get money by June, we can then reinstate some of the benefits that we've had to cut because of this?
For the record, Laura Rich, yes, certain benefits. So things like reducing deductibles and out-of-pocket maxes would be much more complex and very, very difficult to accomplish literally after today. But things like the LTD, HRA, and life insurance would be less complex. It would be something that we could do after the fact, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Betsy, so when you say HRA, it could maybe be HSA too, which would in a way be changing the out-of-pocket max if we were able to give people more money that way.
So Laura Rich, for the record, when I say HRA, I'm referring to the HRA Medicare retiree contributions that we cut. HSA and HRA, it would, if we change or increase HSA funding, it definitely changes the actuarial value of the plan design in the CDHP. And then at that point, yes, I would argue that, let's say that I enroll in the low deductible plan, and then a month later, you tell me that the CDHP has higher funding, I would complain. And I would say, if I would have known that in May, I would have enrolled in the CDHP. So there's definitely, that would be considered a significant plan change and would likely have other consequences. And that's where the complexity rolls into.
Verducci for the record. So I hear that we came out ahead. We had excess reserves. We're no longer requesting money from the CARES Act, but yet we've had a mandate to eliminate the long-term disability, reduce life insurance, and to me, it seems like we should have some discussion on restoring the benefits. This seems somewhat permanent, and once we come out of the pandemic, it would be very nice to have a discussion taking us back to the pre-pandemic levels of the out-of-pocket maximums, deductibles, and I also see a 6-month period where members are not going to be able to have long-term disability if they're going to enroll on their own. And if the funds are there, perhaps there should be a special meeting, could be June, to address the long-term disability, the subsidy with the HRA, HSA, and life insurance, and perhaps GIV came out ahead. And I just would like to point out that I think that these should be temporary measures, and there should be a plan to restore benefits if it's affordable. That's my comments.
Okay, so this is Laura Freed. This is an information item, not an action item, so I'm going to save that discussion until agenda item 8. Are there any other questions for the executive officer on her board report?
Tim here, if I may.
Sure.
Tim Lindley for the record. Kind of bouncing off what Ms. Urban was asking regarding how long we can potentially delay open enrollment. Does PEB staff know when members make changes? For example, are changes mostly made in the first 2 weeks of open enrollment, or the last 2 weeks of open enrollment?
For the record, Laura Rich, that's a good question. I'd have to ask my eligibility staff. But regardless of when they're made, you can go back and let's say on May 1st, I make an election. And then on May 25th, I decide, you know what, I changed my mind. They can go back and change their election. And so we've got that window of time to where, you can change your mind 6 times if you need to. So I do know that there's usually a scramble at the end, because this is, I think, just human, just the way humans are, where, a lot of people just wait until the last minute and procrastinate. And so I know that there's a rush at the end. And there's even, we have several, every year we have situations where, there's people that missed it for whatever reason. And while we don't tend to make exceptions very often, there are exceptions to the rule always.
And Director Rich, the I have is there are comments regarding ARP funding, the American Rescue Plan funding, hasn't gone from the Treasury to the state level. And we've heard discussion about, hey, let's take some of the ARP funding and restore benefits. Who has a say on where the ARP funding goes?
For the record, Laura Rich, that's a good question. So obviously, who has the say? Well, that is, states are now working with the feds to try to figure out the details and try to, I don't have the details behind it. I don't know what the governor's office, what kinds of conversations they're having, but what I can assume is states are proposing, can we do this? Can we do that? And the Treasury is coming back and saying, yes, that's appropriate, or no, that's not appropriate. So I think that that's happening on a higher level, on the federal level. And then at that point, when we get that kind of guidance, then it'll probably land on the legislature, to where the legislature gets to appropriate those funds. And so whether that is, it goes towards certain, maybe it goes across the board to all budgets, maybe it goes to only certain budgets. We don't know how that's going to be appropriated, which is why we can't plan accordingly. One thing that I do want to mention here is that there is one part of that, the American Rescue Act, which I do know applies to PEB, is a COBRA subsidy. So COBRA subsidies are, and this illustrates how complex it can be as far as getting this funding. So there's a section of that act that gives those people that lost their health insurance as a result of losing their job, throughout a certain time period. And I think it's April of 2020 through September of 21, if I remember correctly. Anyone that loses their job during that time period or loses their health insurance during that time period, has the employer can cover that at 100%. And so for 6 months. So my first question was, who pays for this? Is it PEB that is picking up the tab? Or is it the agency that is picking up the tab? Are we charging the agency for these folks that fall into this category? I don't think we had we didn't have a lot of layoffs during the last budget cuts, but I'm sure there's people that fall into this category. So do we charge the agency, or does PEB pick up the tab? And then how do we get that money reimbursed? Well, it turns out that the funding is reimbursed through a Medicare payroll tax credit. So there's definitely, I've been having conversations through the governor's finance office as to when this when this benefit does, when we find ourselves in the situation where, someone comes to PEB and says, hey, I want my COBRA reimbursed at 100%. How do we do this? And we still haven't figured out how to do it because of the complexities of the way that reimbursement is received. So again, it is planning. That just illustrates how complex receiving and getting those funds could be.
This is Betsy. I have another question for Laura, if possible. Laura, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you said the budget closing is projected to be April 6th, which isn't very far along. Every time Medicaid's budget's closed, it always was different than the governor's proposed budget. I don't know if you have inklings that something's going to be different than the governor's proposed budget based on the advocates testifying on your budget, and how would any changes as soon as April 6th, if there are any changes, impact this activity?
Laura Rich, for the record, I wish I had answers to that. I don't know what the legislature is going to do. Do I have inklings? I thought I did, and then as things, this is typical to COVID, things just change on a dime, and I don't know. I don't know.
I don't want you to put yourself on the line here, so I probably should ask this another way. Do we have if by some miracle or something is through the legislative process added back into our budget, which it may or may not be, do we have a contingency plan to act on that, I would guess, with these rate settings and everything as we move forward? It may not be, but if it is, when people are talking about holding an emergency meeting, do we need to have an emergency meeting? What would happen?
Laura Rich, for the record. So on April 6th, first of all, this is the subcommittee meeting, so it has to go to full committee. Typically, there haven't been, major changes from subcommittee to committee, but there's the opportunity still once it gets to full committee to, for those changes to be made. So I think on April 6th, we'll have a better idea, and it will allow for PEB to plan accordingly. Whether we are positioned in a way to be able to pivot, I have expressed basically everything I just explained in this agenda item. The LCB staff is also aware of this as well. They understand our limitations. They understand what is simple, what is more complex, and what if the legislature takes actions, or if these money committees take actions, if they do X, then what does that result in? Or if they do Y, what does that result in? And so my assumption is that the fiscal staff have made the committee members aware of this situation. And I'm hoping that the legislature that the legislature plans accordingly. If there is some kind of mandate to change plan design, let's say at the last minute, that there is a contingency plan in place. For example, they need to remove the noticing requirement and waive the noticing requirement and things like that, or that they give us the opportunity to do that. I don't know what they're going to plan for. So obviously some of these things, for example, LTD and life insurance and things like that, we can do pretty simply, and it doesn't affect the overall plan and the rates. But if they get into more, then it could be a lot heavier of a lift for PEB.
Chairperson Freed, I have a question for Director Rich, if I may.
Sure.
Director Rich, thank you for sharing the complexities of either moving open enrollment, shortening it. It's clearly very difficult. Can you talk a little bit about if there's any methodology or any way that we could actually extend the current plan year? I believe in my history in the state that it's been done once before, where the current plan year was kind of extended by 30 or 60 days. I can't remember what it was, but can you maybe talk about that process? How would that happen? How is it allowed to happen?
Laura Rich for the record. So I have not been a part of that process when it has been done. I believe I have staff that were around when this happened. I believe that Chair Freed was also around in a different capacity when this happened. It can be done. However, there's significant impact to and risk to that decision. First of all, so if you extend one plan year, you're shortening another. And so if you're extending one plan year, for example, we would extend plan year 21, then it gives people more of an opportunity to receive care and reach those accumulators. And so obviously there's a cost to the plan in that situation. Now, obviously with claim suppression and things like that, it's not as concerning, I guess, this year than it would be in a normal year because of that claim suppression that's happening. But in a normal year, right, you reach those accumulators. And so at that point, you're, especially for those on the CDHP, you are receiving free care after that. And so there's definitely a cost to the plan. The opposite is the situation next year, right? So if we extend it in 1 year, then in the next year, all those people that typically reach their out-of-pocket max, now they only have 10 months to reach that instead of 12 months. And so it's an impact to the member next year, a negative impact to the member next year because of that. So that is on a plan perspective, there's definitely a cost and cost to the plan and to the member that way. From an operational perspective, it's pretty chaotic, and it is definitely something that will cause a lot of confusion, add to the confusion among members. It's something that PEB can do anything. PEB is, where we can do anything with the right, legislation and things like that. If there's anything that that needs to happen on that level, but definitely chaotic. And I don't know if maybe if Nancy, if you're on, or if Chair Freed, if you want to chime in, you were both around during this time when PEB did it. If you kind of want to speak to what happened and how it was from an agency perspective.
This is Laura Freed. Oh, Nancy, do you want to go ahead? Because you can speak from the agency perspective and I cannot.
I think she's on. Oh yeah, she's on. Nancy, are you there? Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, this is Laura Freed. Yeah, plan year 2011 was extended by 90 days and plan year 12 was shortened. And what happened is exactly what Laura Rich described. People reached their deductibles and out-of-pocket max. So those extra 90 days was kind of expensive for PEB. And the other thing that was going on was active enrollment, because those were the days when the legislature approved the move from what we longtime people think of as the old PPO plan to the CDHP plan. And so every participant was required to make an active plan choice rather than just passively, if you don't respond, we're going to keep you in your same plan as you've always had, which is so much easier and which is what the vast majority of participants do. They just don't respond and then they stay on the same coverage tier. So it was, and again, I think this is something perhaps Nancy could speak to, but it was pretty chaotic for the staff because they were doing that active enrollment. They had to chase down all the people who didn't respond and still didn't get everybody. And that's sort of neither here nor there about the fiscal impact of doing that. But I'd have to go back into my notes, but I do remember that it was pricey.
So this is Nancy Spinelli, and I think actually you recapped it really well, Laura. As far as if we were to extend the plan year, I don't think at this point we'd have probably a positive open enrollment. So that would be one thing I don't think we'd have to be concerned about. However, what Laura pointed out with the maximum out of pocket and the deductible, those are very big issues for members. So if we extended it, let's say through July or even August, then you have a lot of people who have met their max out of pocket. There's no expense to them. And so the plan is going to have to, pay those extra costs. And then again, like Laura said, by shortening the plan year, you have members who maybe they meet their deductible. So if it's 10 months, for example, they meet their deductible or their out-of-pocket max, and then they feel like they've been gypped basically because they don't get a full 12 months of meeting their out-of-pocket max at that point. So, and that would be a different set of members in some cases. So, and the confusion to our participants, I think it's pretty massive. I'm not sure that we've only done it twice since I've worked for the agency, and that was when we implemented the high deductible plan, and then we did it one time years ago when we changed the plan year. And both times it was very disruptive, I think.
Thank you. Can I just ask a follow-up of Director Rich? So I hear what you say. Thank you very much. If it looks like information is going to start to trickle in around the stimulus, the latest round of stimulus, I guess a couple of questions. So, how would a decision to extend the plan year come about, firstly? And then do you think that doing some form of extension would allow dollars to perhaps be allocated in the way, to impact plan design versus just kind of the ancillary stuff. So I'm just kind of, from a timeline perspective, is today it? I know we have to set rates, but then, on April 6th, for example, if you get lots of feedback from the legislators about money coming in or whatever, would that be something that they could direct? Just trying to understand the process.
So I don't know if Laura Rich, for the record, I don't know if there's a good answer to that or a right answer to that, because we're dealing with not a lot of information right now. When would we have to make that decision to extend the plan year? I mean, technically, we could do it, at the last minute if we needed to. And I mean, I'd have to think about it. I have to go back and probably look at how, if there's any kind of legislation, anything that would prevent us from making that last minute decision. I think on April 6th, we'll have some guidance, but I don't think the legislature even knows what they're looking at this point. And so I think that there's a lot up in the air, and I don't think that we're going to know anything concrete. I think we're going to have an idea of what the appetite is of, reinstating the ability to reinstate some of these benefits, but I don't think we're going to be able to address the option of extending that. I would recommend, if this is something that does come to fruition, I mean, we'd probably want to get the actuaries involved. There's a lot of implications to a decision like this, and so I'd like to have a lot more information before decisions were made. But as far as making that decision, honestly, I mean, if the legislature said this is what we're doing, then this is what we're doing. The board could technically make that decision too at the last minute as well if necessary. But again, there's so much up in the air right now that we don't even know if that stimulus money is even going to be able to be allocated at any point in the near future.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to add a couple of notes. Well, one note, excuse me. This is Laura Freed for the record. In agenda item 6, we have a couple of contracts starting July 1st. So it might be a little bit logistically difficult to have new network contracts starting July 1st, but have a plan year extended to, September or October or whatever. So I hope that the board, and actually I hope that the legislative money committees will keep that in mind, because I do think that they're sensitive to the fact that folks have provided us a lot of comment, and now that the ball is in their court, they have the ability to act on some of those express participant desires. But yeah, there's, as we've discussed now, there's some logistical challenges, and I don't want the contract terminations and commencements of new contracts to mess this up even further if we decide to go this route. So. Board members, any other questions on agenda item 5? Okay, hearing none, I think let's take a break and let's come back at 10:45 and then crack into agenda item 6, shall we? Okay, is everyone back?
Can you confirm that you can hear me now?
We can hear you.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Technical difficulties.
Oh my goodness. Of course.
All right, everybody, it's 10:46. So if Laura Rich is back. Oh, she is. Okay, great. We'll call the meeting back to order and move to agenda item 6 and talk about contracts.
Thank you. This is Carrie Eaton for the record. Item 6.1 is just an overview of the current active PEB contracts, and no action is necessary on that item. Item 6.2 is requesting that the board approve new contracts resulting from the solicitations that the board approved for a financial auditor on May 28th and a health plan auditor on September 24th. The first new contract in item 6.2.1 is a contract resulting from the health plan auditor services RFP that was released on November 24th. On December 22nd, PEB received 2 proposals, and the evaluation period began on December 23rd and ended on January 12th. The 4-member evaluation committee included 1 PEB board member, and Claim Technologies, Inc. received the highest score by the evaluation committee, and PEB has successfully negotiated this contract. Claim Technologies, Inc. will be a new vendor for PEB for health claim auditing services. However, we don't expect any issues in the transition from our current vendor. The effective date of the contract is anticipated to be April 13th upon BOE approval through June 30th, 2027. The services are expected to begin on May 1st, and the contract maximum is $1,407,656. Staff is recommending that the board ratify and approve the evaluation committee's recommendation to contract with Claim Technologies, Inc. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Tom Verducci for the record. I was reading here in section 6.1 under diversified dental services, the termination date reads June 30, 206. I think that's a typo. Should that be the year 2026, or could we just kind of clarify the termination date under diversified dental services as far as the actual date there? Appears to be a typo.
This is Carrie Eaton for the record. For the record, you are correct. The new contract for diversified dental, I will correct that termination date. Thank you.
And just to follow up, what would be the correct termination date? Is it 2026? Is that how it should be?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, board members. So does anybody have detailed questions about the RFP process that resulted in the staff recommendation to approve the contract with Claim Technologies for health plan auditing services? And by the way, I want to thank whichever of the board members served on this RFP evaluation committee. I know it's a time commitment and it's sometimes really, really dull. So thank you. Okay, if nobody has any questions, I'll accept a motion to ratify and approve the evaluation committee's recommendation to contract with Claim Technologies.
Linda Fox for the record, I will make that motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Tim Lindley for the record, also.
Okay. All right, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, no? Great, the motion carries. Okay, let's move on to 6.2.2, financial auditing services.
Thank you. For the record, Carrie Eaton. The next new contract is in 6.2.2 is a contract resulting from the financial auditor services RFP that was released on January 8th. On February 16th, PEB
received 2 proposals. The evaluation period began on February 17th and ended on March 9th. Clifton Larson Allen LLP received the highest score by the 6-member evaluation committee that included 2 PEB board members and other subject matter experts. Clifton Larson LLP will also be a new vendor for PEB for financial auditing services. And we, again, don't expect any issues in the transition from our current vendor. The effective date of this contract is anticipated to be May 11th upon BOE approval through December 31st, 2024. And these services are expected to begin on July 1st, 2021. The contract maximum is $212,485. And staff is recommending that the board ratify and approve the evaluation committee's recommendation to contract with Clifton Larson Allen LLP.
Any questions, board members?
This is Betsy, and I have no problems with this contract. I'm just curious because both of these bids only resulted in 2 bidders. Now, the first one, claims auditing, there may not be as many claims auditors, but you would think financial. I'm just surprised about that, but I have no problems with it other than that comment.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bailey, it's nice to hear from you.
Well, thank you. So moved to approve.
All right. Do I have a second?
Marcia Urban, second.
Okay, I'll give it to Ms. Urban.
Faster.
You rung in first. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
No? Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. Any opposed? No? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. All righty, so.
Carrie.
Go ahead, sorry, Carrie.
Carrie Eaton for the record. Item 6.3, PEB does not currently have any contract amendments pending. Item 6.4 is requesting that the board authorize staff to complete request for proposals for 2 contracts that are due to expire on June 30th, 2022. The first solicitation in item 6.4.1 is a solicitation for actuarial consulting services. The current actuarial consulting contract with Aon Consulting began in 2016 and is due to expire on June 30th, 2022. And this RFP should be released prior to November for a July 22 contract start date. Staff is recommending that the board authorize staff to complete a request for proposal for an actuarial consultant. And anyone who would like to volunteer to be on this committee, please do. I'll answer any question.
This is Laura Freed. I have a question. Ms. Mooneyhan, is it okay to combine these motions for the RFPs for actuary as well as basic life insurance? Since we're authorizing the RFP process, or is that, would you prefer 2 motions?
No, it's totally fine to do so.
Okay.
Assuming that the motions are going to be similar, of course, they should be broken out.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yes.
If there's any dissent.
Understood. Okay.
But yes, if you want to combine them, that's fine.
Okay. Well, I will say, this is Laura Freed again. Anybody who would like to serve on these committees, again, thank you for those of you who have. If you'd like to be on the actuary committee or the life insurance committee, please do reach out to the executive officer. Yeah, and notice that on the next page, I don't want to steal Carrie's thunder here, but boy, do we have a lot of RFPs coming up. So anybody who wants to can get in on this. With that, do I have a motion?
Well, Tom Verducci for the record. I want to point out that I'm available to serve on these subcommittees. I've also volunteered already to be on one of them, and I'm willing to be on both of them. And, feel free to count me in wherever I could help here.
Laura Rich for the record. Evaluation committees are supposed to be confidential, so I would avoid stating this on the record and just reaching out to me, any board members who are interested to reach out to me privately so that we can maintain the confidentiality of who is on the evaluation committee.
So this is Betsy. I move to recommend that the staff complete a request for proposal for actuarial consultant and another request for proposal for basic life insurance contract.
Thank you. I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Great, motion carries. Thank you. This is Laura Freed. Carrie, did you want to go through the chart under 6.5? Or is that just for our edification?
This is Carrie Eaton. Really, it's just an overview of what's in progress. So we're available for questions.
Okay, thank you.
This is Jennifer Krupp for the record. I had 2 quick questions.
Okay.
Could you just, I wasn't sure what the second opinion or the transparency contracts were, or potential RFPs that are ready to be released.
So Laura Rich for the record. So today in place, we have the transparency tool is Healthcare Blue Book. And so that's that app that you have on your phone that will allow you to shop and compare for different services and facilities. Second opinion services is something that is fairly new. We haven't had in place for a very long time. Currently, we use 2nd.MD. And basically what that is a second opinion service that is, it's free of charge to the member. It's kind of billed as a claim through the process, and it provides a second opinion service to members should they not be, should there not be like a provider available in the area. We've actually had staff test it on their own for their own situations, and it has been very beneficial because you're able to get a second opinion from someone across the country. And so it's a good service to have, and it's not widely used yet because I don't think that members know of this service and are aware of this service, but it is a good service to have.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. And this is Jennifer Krupp for the record.
Thank you. Okay. Well, with that, let's move on to agenda item 7, the voluntary benefit platform implementation.
Thank you, Chair Freed. Nick Proper for the record. I'll be providing an update regarding voluntary benefit selection and transition with recommendations for the board. Keep in mind these recommendations are built off of current budget and just current processes. So for example, when we get to the long-term disability plan, that could change depending on various budgetary changes. So at the November board meeting, the contract was approved for LSI to provide an eligibility and enrollment system, and it was approved by BOE in December. Though the contract is with LSI, the actual enrollment and eligibility platform, including voluntary benefits, is subcontracted to Benefit Focus, with the system currently scheduled to go live by January 1st, 2022, replacing the current system. A brief history about voluntary benefits is they were implemented in PEB in 2019 and are currently administered through CoreStream, which is the licensed subcontracted vendor of the current enrollment and eligibility vendor, Morneau Shepell. But due to the mid-year change of vendors for enrollment and eligibility, including voluntary benefits, PEB is recommending a voluntary benefits special enrollment period at the end of the year for a January 1st, 2022 effective date with Benefit Focus. The licensed agency of Benefit Focus to offer voluntary benefits is Benefit Store, with licenses current and held in all 50 states. So on page 2 of the report, it shows a table with current product offerings and current carriers with recommendations for each that I will go through. So currently the standard offers voluntary life and short-term disability plans. And this recommendation includes moving accident, critical illness, and hospital indemnity plans from the current carrier Aflac to the standard, as well as introducing a long-term disability plan administered through the standard. For ID theft, the legal plan, and voluntary vision, the recommendation is to keep the current carrier, so no changes there. For auto and home insurance, there are currently 3 carriers, and the recommendation is to move to 1 carrier, being Liberty Mutual, which currently contains the majority of enrollment in this product, being 1,300 versus 68. For pet insurance, it is a similar recommendation of streamlining carriers, moving from 2 carriers to 1 with Nationwide, which again contains the majority of enrollment in this product as well. For long-term care plans, this recommendation is a little bit different than the others, and it's actually to revisit this product for open enrollment 22 for July 1st, 22 effective date. And this is because of the limitations with the current carrier in Benefitfocus, as there is a lack of integration between the 2. But members with a current long-term care policy can absolutely continue to keep the policy with Unum by moving to a direct bill basis, or they can cancel their policy. And for all voluntary benefits transition, PEB will continue to work with CoreStream, Benefitfocus, and the DOI, so we can ensure a proper transition and a robust communication plan to members, displaying all of their options regarding the transition, regarding keeping or canceling their current policies, so it won't be a surprise to anyone what is going on. And again, we will continue to work with Benefitfocus and the DOI to identify and potentially propose new offerings in the future, such as an orthodontia, a dental buy-up plan, including orthodontia and various other products. And with that, Chair Freed, I can either pause for questions or hand the presentation off to Jen with Benefitfocus for an overview of the LTD plan options.
Unless the board has burning questions, I would like to hand it off to Benefitfocus and hear more about LTD.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Peary with Benefitfocus. I'm going to try to share my screen here to make this a little bit easier for everyone to see. One second. And I'm looking at, if you're following along manually, if you look at attachment A. Zoom is not cooperating with me. I apologize for that. If you want to follow along attachment A and you go to page 28 of the attachment, we can look at the voluntary LTD plan. And again, this is a contingent plan based on the final basic LTD decision. We went ahead and had the standard quote this plan for PEB, because there's really a big differentiator in this standards offering. And the reason for that is if LTD, basic LTD ends on 6/30 of 21, there is a gap between 7/1 of 21 and 1/1 of 22 when this plan would take effect. The standard has agreed to waive pre-existing conditions limitations for that, say, 6-month period for all PEB members should they enroll for the 1/1/22 effective date. There are 2 plan options. One is a plan A, if you're on page 27, and a plan B. Plan A most closely aligns with the employer-sponsored plan that exists today with a 60% payout schedule, whereas Plan B is a cheaper option for employees with only a 50% payout schedule, and you can choose between 60% or 50%. Most of Plan A very closely aligns with what is there today. The main difference being between employee and employer paid. And one thing that we were able to work with the standard on is waiving a minimum participation. We understand that this is something that some employees may want to take advantage of, some may not. And PEB and Benefit Focus didn't feel comfortable with a 15% minimum participation, which is fairly industry standard. But the standard was able to waive that as long as we work on a joint communication plan to ensure that members understand that after 1/1 of 22, they would be subject to a 12-month pre-existing condition wait period. I'll scroll through. I don't know if there are any specific questions you'd like to go through. Some cost and member examples, if you look at page 28. For the 60% plan, Plan A, there is a rate table there and some examples to make it a little more real life. Say I'm a 33-year-old person working for the state, annual salary of $50,000. And you see the formula here that would end up being a $94.50 annual cost for this benefit and a $7.88 monthly cost for me. Again, it's an age graded benefit. So if I was 51 and made $70,000, then the formula is the same, but my cost would end up being $33.95 monthly. Plan B, if you go down to page 29, there's a couple of examples there. If I'm 42 and I make $60,000 annually, then my monthly cost would be $16.45. If I'm 60 years old and I make $90,000 annually, then my monthly cost would be $32.63.
So this is Tom Verducci for the record. I wanted to ask Ms. Perry, is there a maximum monthly cost for a highly compensated employee? Does it max out? And, part B of the question here would be, what happens to the employee during the 6-month period should they become disabled? Is there going to be, perhaps one poor soul out there that's just out of luck that happens to be disabled during this 6-month gap? Is there any contingency plans, something that we could put in place to avoid the catastrophic event that could happen to a smaller group of individuals here?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Jennifer Peary speaking. So for your first question around the pre-disability earnings, that would max at $12,500 monthly, and the max monthly benefit payout is $7,500. So rates would stop at that period. In terms of a gap, someone wouldn't be covered, from my understanding, after 7/1 until 1/1 of 22. I'm not sure, Peb, if there are any other contingency plans that you may have that you want to comment on.
This is Laura Rich for the record. There are unfortunately no other contingency plans because of the inability to fund this benefit. So members could potentially get their own benefit on their own independently for that gap in time, but PEB does not have the ability to provide a safety net for that time period.
So Tom Verducci for the record, as a follow-up here, I know we've been mandated to eliminate the long-term disability. We have a meeting coming up, it looks like, with the Legislative Money Committees, April 6th, in 2 weeks from now. And, I think part of our mission is not to create a catastrophe for anybody, even though it's a smaller group of individuals. I would be more comfortable if there was something in place that could cover, this group of people for the 6-month period. I just very uncomfortable putting someone in that position where even if they want insurance, they don't have it. Just my thoughts there.
Michelle Kelly for the record. I have a question on the table provided. I'm just wondering, can you talk about the pre-existing condition period that's listed as 3/12? What does that mean?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So Jennifer Peary speaking. Pre-existing condition. So the 3 months is a standard wait period for any policy. And that's because typically short-term disability would be in effect for those 3 months before the nature of long-term disability is more long-term, right? So you have to go satisfy your short-term window before you can hit your long-term window. The 12-month period is what I was speaking about earlier, that typically if someone didn't have coverage before and they elected for the first time, they would have a 12-month window where any pre-existing conditions would make them ineligible for that long-term disability coverage for those 12 months. What is happening here with the standard is because everyone has been insured before and tentatively up until 6/30, they are waiving that pre-existing condition period if a member elects coverage of 1/1/22. The 3 months still exist just based on the nature of short-term versus long-term disability. And then after 1/1/22, that 12 months is back in effect.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up just because I don't now I don't understand, so I'm a little confused.
No,
so let me so right now we're going to have a break of 6 months. So as far as the 3/12 goes, if an employee enrolls for this benefit, it starts January 1st, 2022, and then on February 1st, they're in an accident that makes them unable to do their job. Can you talk to me what happens in that scenario?
Sure. So at that point, they would, if they have a short-term disability coverage, they would be eligible for short-term disability after the short-term disability waiting period, which is typically much shorter, say 2 weeks, a month, a very small amount of time. Then if they are qualified for long-term disability coverage, they would be eligible within 90 days. So after that 3-month period.
Okay, so different to, and maybe this is a question for Director Rich. I'm sorry to show my ignorance here. So right now, and I'm just thinking about LTD. So right now, if an employee has an incident, it's a 180-day waiting period. So they have an incident today. If they're qualified for long-term disability, it would start to pay in 180 days. So are you saying that the waiting period now is only 90 days? This long-term disability period benefit would start to pay after 90 days? Or am I confused?
Let me get some clarification on that because I do understand your question and I don't want to answer that incorrectly for you.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
And
thank
then
you.
I do have a follow-up question. These rates are much better than anything I've seen. So thank you, staff, for doing so much work, Director Rich. But I do wonder, with all of the voluntary products that are listed here, including the LTD, how are they rated? So are they rated specifically for the PEP population? Are they rated for Nevada? How does that work?
Sure. So in all of our products, we worked with each of the carriers to rate specifically for PEP.
Okay.
Yes.
And then so does that mean though that are there any rate guarantees, like a number of years that these rates are guaranteed for, or how does that all work for our participants too?
They are. Each plan is a little bit different. However, in general, we ask for every carrier to match our contract term. So it would be 4-year rate guarantee.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
Those were very good questions. This is Laura Freed, sorry. Any other questions, board members? Okay.
Sorry, I'm slow to unmute. This is Jennifer Krupp for the record. I just had one quick clarifying question too regarding the long-term disability, but the in relation to the 3-month/12-month pre-existing condition period, any claims would have to occur within the coverage period, correct? So, or any events. So if a person had an accident as Board Member Kelly had said, February 2nd or February 1st of 2022, that date would provide coverage for them under this voluntary long-term disability. But if somebody had an event that happened in, say, October of 2021, that event would make them ineligible for this LTD coverage, correct?
Okay.
This is Betsy. I have a couple questions. Our current plan, is that able to be extended at someone paying privately? I saw on some of these others that when they ended, people could continue coverage by paying privately. So would somebody be able to pick up until this one started January 1, the long-term disability July 1 paying privately for that gap period? It just made me think of that when I saw that some of the other products they're able to pick up privately.
Nick Proper for the record. Betsy, the other ones are voluntary, meaning people actively enrolled in them and purchase them and pay for them. The current long-term disability plan is bundled in the basic package of a PEB benefit. So it's two separate things. I'm not sure if people can port that considering it's part of the PEB package.
And this is Laura Rich, just to add to that, the rates, it would be the same vendor, right? So currently today, the standard offers long-term disability through the basic benefit package. And this option of voluntary LTD is offered through voluntary. So you're getting the same vendor. I would assume that the rate would be the person would get a better rate through the voluntary option than they would even if that was an option that they could do, because this currently the contract is through PEB. It's a group rated product, and so it's not member based. So this is definitely the voluntary option is essentially what you're proposing, and giving those members the ability to do it on their own.
If you don't mind, Chair Fried, I have one more question. I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the rate table that's been provided in the examples. And I see that in the chart where the benefit is, both benefits are a stop at 65, but we still have rates for people who are 65 to 999, and I hope to be that person. But I'm just wondering, when that goes live, can they be removed? If there's no benefit payable, we don't really want people signing up thinking there would be some benefit payable if they're already 65, right? Am I interpreting right that at 65, the benefit just stops?
That's correct. So we can, within the technology, prevent based on age for enrollment. That is a capability within the technology. So someone wouldn't be able to enroll in something they're not eligible for.
Thank you. And are you going to get back to us regarding the waiting period and all of that?
I will. I was just looking, and the waiting period will remain at 180 days for the plan option A or plan option B. But what I do need to get back to you with are some clear examples around the pre-existing condition period of the 3 months versus 12 months on that, and coupled with a 180-day wait period.
Thank you. It's extraordinarily confusing.
Thank you.
This is Laura Fried. Okay, Mr. Proper, you have a laundry list of recommendations for the board. Board members, hearing what you've heard so far, and I heard some concerns about this gap between the end of this plan year and midway through the next plan year. how would you like to proceed, my friends?
It's Michelle here. I know you're looking for a motion, but can I just ask one more? I'm just wondering regarding that gap. One of the notes I'd written to myself was, I wonder if PEB staff could advocate to Standard to offer the opportunity to port that for the 6 months at the rates they're offering through the package. Not as a contract, but because your contract's ending, I'm just wondering if there's some opportunity or if you've already explored that and they've said no, just for those people out there who are anxious about, you know, such an important benefit just disappearing.
For the record, Laura Rich, I did ask that question as I believe several months ago when this option was explored, is, you know, could members that want to keep it continue that through the PEB contracted rate? And unfortunately, that is not something that the Standard can accommodate, because this is not it's a group policy. So it is not priced based on you know, salary and age and things like that. And so if you take one person and you have to independently rate it versus group rate it, right? And so it's a whole different product when you're doing that. So there's no ability to do that, unfortunately, right now.
Laura, this is Betsy, and it may be very, very expensive because it would have to be individually rated, but I don't know if the Standard would be willing, as if I walked off the street into their office, at least to provide paperwork. And then I know that looks like PEB's going towards one company versus another, but it would tide the whole being Standard here and Standard there for the 6 months, so that when the information got sent out, it could be couched that PEB is not recommending Standard over other companies, but this might fill the gap. This is what Standard would offer to you. And I don't even know if Standard would offer an individual policy to bridge it for 6 months, but if they would, then somebody might, let's say it's $80 a month, but somebody may be willing to pay that just to bridge. I don't know, but it that's just an idea to throw out. And I don't know if it's able to be done or not, but then somebody would not have to go and cold call someone and ask for a policy for 6 months.
Laura Rich, that's a good idea, Betsy. We can look at that. I believe that the Standard does not offer coverage for individual policies like this, just for they tend to focus on group products, but I will reach out to them and just confirm. And should that not be an option, we can look at other options and possibly provide that to, you know, to members.
I don't know if it's obsolete now, but I carried an individual policy from age 23 to age 65. Well, not 65, I'm not there yet, till I retired. Then all of a sudden it occurred to me, I'm retired, so I shouldn't keep paying for this. It took like a year for that to occur to me. But anyway, so there used to be out there, so maybe we could also look, and I know it's very busy, that these 4 companies offer individual policies if the Standard wouldn't, but I bet you they wouldn't sell them for just 6 months.
Well, and the other question, Betsy, is evidence of insurability. So I think that that's where we really run into issues when you try to get an individual policy for a 50-year-old, right? Just one more question, and it's more a detailed question about the entire suite of these voluntary benefits. Who owns the contracts? Who's negotiating these contracts on PEB's behalf now and going forward?
So for the record, Laura Rich, so Nick touched on this a little bit in his report. Back in the day, PEB had several voluntary products, and we wanted to offer more voluntary products. However, we have a very limited staff, and in holding these contracts ourselves didn't make any sense. Additionally, there's in this industry with the enrollment and eligibility vendors, they've leveraged these solutions where they have platforms of multiple products that can be offered, and they're able to kick down kick down discounts, because what they do is they actually receive commissions off of all of these different products. And so it's a win-win situation, because in the past, and this is what happened several years ago when PEB went down this direction with Morna Chappelle, is we were able to secure a system at no cost, and at a system upgrade. We went from a very, very archaic looking system to, we got a new product, a new enrollment system, a new face for members to be able to go through the enrollment process, and a lot of useful new tools at no cost. And we were also able to offer a whole suite of voluntary products without having to handle the solicitations and the contracts and things like that. Now the board still has the ability to to pick the carriers and the products and things like that, but this is all handled on the level of from this other vendor. And so it's a win-win, because members also get a lot more products than we would be able to offer. In the past, there was only a couple things that PEB offered, and now they have a whole menu of products that they could choose from. So we're repeating basically the same situation that we did a few years ago with Morna Chappelle. We're doing this with Benefit Focus when we transitioned to the new platform in January of 22. And the whole reason that these are being presented today is because we want to make sure that there's no disruption and people still have that ability to enroll in these products and to carry these products and moving forward. And then in moving towards July of 2022, there will be more options introduced to the board as well to be able to, or actually, sorry, not July, but in May, the open enrollment in May of 2022. So PEB can offer potentially more voluntary products as well.
Great, thank you.
Well, heck, this is Laura Freed. I am, as Michelle Kelly noted, looking for a motion because we certainly do need to open a special enrollment period and give folks plenty of time to think about their choices as we change carriers on some of these voluntary benefits. So does anybody feel comfortable making that motion or something different?
It's Michelle Kelly for the record.
All right.
I'm just looking at the summary of recommendations, and I'm prepared to make a motion that we accept staff's recommendations 1 through 8 on this agenda item. I did want to note that we are still waiting on some follow-up information on the LTD though, so I'm not sure how that impacts it.
Sure, you can absolutely make, you can approve with the note to staff that we would like to get more information from Benefit Focus. So that's fine.
So moved, thank you.
All right, and I'll second that. Okay, board members, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, thanks. Motion carries. All right, agenda item 8. Oh boy, rate setting for plan year 22. Let's do this.
Let's do this. Yes. Laura Rich for the record. This rate setting was interesting to say the least. COVID has really introduced some unique variables into PEB and into the state in general in our budgets. And so there was a lot of guesswork that went into this, and then we had to go back, and then so there's just been a lot of anomalies in this plan you're getting set for rate setting. We originally submitted a budget last August, and as I said, it's undergone a lot of different versions because of the different versions of budget cuts and things like that. And we had to pivot and adjust to that landscape, not just the budget landscape, but also the healthcare environment as well. So at this point in the process, a lot of those budgetary decisions, as we've touched on already, those responsibilities lie within the legislature. But we're put in a predicament where we have to ensure that the program is prepared for the May 1 open enrollment date. So that means that we have to set rates based on the information that we know today. So although the changes have been made to PEB's budget changes made to PEB's budget during the legislative process, such as deviations to the employer subsidy amounts, would have an effect on rates. The legislature, again, as I said earlier, is very aware and sensitive to this. And so they have received the information. They have been very well educated on our situation. And they understand the evolving situation that PEB has been in throughout this plan year. So PEB's budget is somewhat unique because our budget has to factor in 2 years of trend. So we have to guess what trend is, what our plan is going to look like 2 years in advance. This is already difficult doing it 1 year in advance, but it makes it even more difficult doing it 2 years in advance. On top of that, add in the COVID factor, and it makes it almost impossible. We have a lot of variables in there, and we have a lot of unknowns in the future. So as a result, any trend increases in year 2, for those board members who don't understand or who haven't been around to really be a part of this process, the budget is approved and really set for 2 years. And so we guess the trend and we project the trend using the information that we have and budget accordingly. And so that when we get into year 2, if projections are off, which again, I just said, it is very difficult to project a year in advance, let alone 2 years in advance. So if projections are off, there's no way to accommodate for any increases in utilization in the second plan year. So that is borne 100% on employees. There's no way to increase the amount that the legislature has approved to increase that employer contribution. So everything gets pushed onto the employee in that second year. So in normal years, this is already a challenge. And this year, it makes it even much more of a challenge because of the situation that we're faced with right now. In plan year 21, as was touched on the budget report, we've had a significant claim suppression. And when I say significant, I'm not putting a number to it because one, it's a moving target. We don't know what we're looking at. The amount of excess that we're going to see is it's very dependent on the the utilization, and if this claim suppression continues, and how long will it continue, and when do the tables turn, and when do we see utilization start again, and not just utilization start again, but all this backlog of delayed care, then we're going to start to see it. So all of this claim suppression that has happened could come back and will likely come back as claim costs in future years. And so there's concerns in the industry of these potential spikes moving forward. So we are very considerate right now of this excess cash that we are projecting. And again, it's projections. It doesn't necessarily exist yet, because if the board recalls, back in, I think, the July board meeting, there was a discussion about excess cash and the constant moving target and volatility of excess cash. And so there was a discussion about, when does excess cash actually exist? And the decision was, it exists in September, when the books when the fiscal year has closed, when we have closed our books, and we can then say, okay, here was the revenue in versus expenditures out, and this is the differential cash that is available. So really the excess does not exist until September. But there is likely going to be a significant excess, but we also want to be very considerate that that excess may be necessary in future years. And when I say future years, it could be in 22, it could be in 23, it could be in 24. We don't know, because what has happened is all of these delays in care and surgeries, all of this that has happened because of COVID is now is going to snowball. This is the industry, I guess, thought is that it's going to snowball, and it could eventually lead to the spike in costs in future years. There's this pent up demand, and we're going to see it, whether it's in 22, 23, 24, we don't know. And so the excess that we've accumulated this year may be necessary next year. So we have to be very considerate of that. When we were building the budget, we knew that there was a potential for issues in 23, and we wanted to make sure to adjust for it. So PEB staff and the governor's finance office, we worked together to adjust the employer subsidy amounts. So instead of giving the same subsidy in year one, and when I say employer subsidy, it's the employer contribution. Instead of giving the same subsidy in year one and in year two, what we did is there's a finite subsidy amount, right? Because you have to adjust to the budget. So we gave less in 22 and allocated more in 23, so that rates would not skyrocket for members in 23. This is back when we had less information to work off of, and it was still we were still early into early into the budget building process, and so there was some thought or some intention to mitigate the 23 potential 23 increases to premiums by doing that. So as more claim information became available and actuaries began applying the standard rate methodology, that didn't work out. That plan didn't work out too well. Plan year 22 resulted in sizable increases to participant premiums. It's not terrible, but it is a sizable increase. And I think the goal here was to keep rates relatively flat in 22. And there was an increase. Additionally, we would be increasing the rates and ending the plan year with a sizable excess lump of cash. So if you can think about it, we've cut benefits, we're raising premiums, and we're going to end up with this mountain of excess. Optics wise, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't look good, right? It's why are we raising premiums if PEB has all this money? So we went back and started looking at, well, what can we do? And so what we did is we looked at what does it look like if you balance the employer contribution between the 2 years, and you make it the same between year 1 and year 2. And there was much less volatility, or predicted volatility, because again, we don't know what that 23 is going to look like, but it's our projections as best as we can. And so there was less volatility between the 2 plan years. It's stable rates, and we're looking at a fairly, you're not going up and down in rates, from plan year to plan year. So we went back to the governor's finance office and said, hey, is there any way to adjust our budget and adjust the employer subsidy between year 1 and year 2? And unfortunately, we could not do that. It was too late in the game. FY22 PEB budget affects every other agency budget. And so FY22 just did not, it didn't have any flexibility to introduce more employer subsidy. So we went back to the drawing board and thought, okay, well, how can we do this artificially? How can we artificially go and equal out the subsidy so that it has ultimately the same effect and we flatten rates? And so that is essentially what option 2 is. Option 1 is applying the standard methodology, board approved methodology that has always been used. And option 2 is going back, and what we're doing is essentially using about $4 million of excess to suppress the overall rate to not the overall rate, the participant premium, not the overall rate, that does not change, the participant premium to a flat dollar amount, and so that there are no increases to premiums in plan year 21. This option 1 the standard rate methodology would potentially lead to an increase of, depending on the claim suppression and how long that lasts, there could be this could contribute to the accrual of more excess. So it just doesn't make sense to increase those rates right now. Typically, we would not be providing option 2 as I think Chair Freed will agree with me on this, we would not want to ever provide an option where we are artificially suppressing rates, because it has downstream effects in later years where you're using one lump of cash to artificially lower rates. But when that lump of cash is gone, in subsequent years, those rates then just skyrocket because you no longer have that. You're starting at a low level and you no longer have that cash to keep it at a low level. And so the trend has since increased, and you're now seeing very significant spikes really fast. And members can't usually absorb that. They can absorb baby steps, but not these large increases. So we would normally not be recommending an option like this, but we would also not, this is not a normal situation. This is not, a normal condition. We would normally not see excess accrue so quickly because of a pandemic. So that is in a nutshell, and I know it's very complex. There's a lot of intricacies to this. There's the budget portion, there's the actuarial rating portion of this, and it's all kind of blends in together. I know that this is complex to understand, so I am happy to take questions, comments. We also have Ms. Messier from Aon on here as well, who can address questions from her actuarial perspective as well.
Yes, Tom Verducci for the record. Under the option 2, are we going, is this going to be requesting spending money from the discretionary account, or excuse me, the excess reserves? Is there a certain amount that comes out of what we used to call excess reserves and we're now calling differential cash? Option 2, spend down from the differential cash. That would be my question.
For the record, Laura Rich, yes, it uses about $4 million of that, of the projected excess.
Okay, thank you, Officer Rich. I did have a follow-up. So does that require that we go to the GFO and the legislative money committees to spend down from that particular account?
Laura Rich, for the record, yes, this was that is a very good question. This was a question that we posed to LCB fiscal staff to ensure that we were not violating any of the statutory language that was put into that was added into the budget last year. And there seems to be a consensus that this is adequate, and this option is something that does not violate any of those the language that was in our budget.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think this question will go to Aon. I believe in the past we had a model for projecting the effects of future COVID claims, and have those been built in to the rate assumptions? Is there any particular model? Because I know we're banking on a lot of members did not have medical procedures last year, and then we're going to see that, as COVID starts going away, that perhaps they're going to go back to the doctors and start having these procedures that have been put off. But is there a particular model as opposed to just the assumption that members are going to start going back to the doctor?
Stephanie Messier from Aon for the record. There are, so it's a little bit different than the model we shared with you previously, right? Where it's really trying to previously model the impact of future infection rates, the amount of severity of those folks, how many hospitalizations are you going to see? And we've really changed the models now to try to take in national data on what's happening at facilities, how much have they seen an increase or continued decrease, right, in the amount of claims coming through those systems, as well as national surgery centers, doctors' offices, and those kind of things, as well as the impact and I guess the timeline, if you will, of people getting inoculated with the vaccine. So our models are different than they were previously. Unfortunately, because this is still unknown to a lot of folks, the models keep getting retooled by the day, right, to take in the most up-to-date data and try to incorporate all that. And it's very much differs from one region to the next, as well as, people are opening things up or removing mask mandates and those sorts of things. Some of our guidance say that depending on your clients and the type of work that they're doing, whether they're returning to offices, whether they've been on the front lines, some folks may continue to see claim suppression throughout calendar year 21, upwards of 2 to 3%, right? They'll come in 2 to 3% below a normal year. Conversely, some clients may see as high as a 5% increase over an average year. And it's not just 5% over 2020, right? That's just 5% if 2020 had been normal. And 2020 on average for folks from a medical perspective was a good average is to say 10% short of a normal year. Now that doesn't include your pharmacy. We did not see any decrease really from any client on the pharmacy side. If anything, we saw a little bit of an uptick in pharmacy claims. And pharmacy tends to make up about 20% of your total spend from a medical and pharmacy perspective. So if you want to think about the overall suppression on average, a lot of folks came in about 8% under where they expected to spend money in 2020. So for 2022 and 2021, we not only think that trend will reoccur, you may see a little bit of suppression if you're lucky, but you could go the opposite direction. So instead of seeing a normal, let's say 6% trend year, if you're on the higher side of those estimates, you could end up seeing a 9 to 10% trend year, which we haven't really seen, probably in about 5 to 6 years in the industry. Did that help answer your question?
Yes, it sure does. So, just as a follow-up, it looks like, I heard we have a mountain of excess and came out ahead. And my comment would be, state workers did not come out ahead here. And I think and members in the program, they came out behind. And, wherever we could encourage the legislative money committees to, perhaps provide some relief. I know we're keeping premiums flat, but there is a big reduction here in the level of benefits that's being provided. As we're coming out of the pandemic, it would seem appropriate to provide some relief to the people that are suffering from the cuts. I know that's a little sidetracked there, but I just wanted to point it out for the record. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Bailey, go ahead.
I'd like to go back to Tom a little bit. I agree with Tom, because if we have excess revenue, which we know 2 years ago we did, and maybe 3 years ago before that, we used those reserves and then we paid a penalty for it because they didn't think we were following the right path to use that reserve money. We got the state employees out there, they're all suffering, and we all understand that. But if we're coming out with more reserve again, why can't we go back to the budget people in the governor's office, the financial people, and see if we can do something for these people? They're just hanging out there, and we all get the emails from them, and we get the texts, and we hear them verbally on the phone. So we know the suffering's real. And if this board can do something to eliminate some of that in any way, shape, or form, no matter who we got to go back to and ask, can we not have our staff follow up on some of this and maybe get some relief for these people? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, and I know it's back, but I'm very concerned about our retirees again. They're out on a limb again, and we need to do something for them. Thank you.
So Laura Rich, for the record, let me try to address that. We are projecting significant reserves. There's no doubt that there's going to be an excess when we close out the plan year. However, the concern here is that let's say we come out with $20 million in excess at the end of this plan year. There's a concern that those 20 million will end up coming back to the plan next year. And so it's not that we only have an excess temporarily, because we're going to need that money because of the delay in care and those people that have not been utilizing healthcare. One will end up scheduling these surgeries that haven't been scheduled, that have been delayed. But then also there's the potential where there's going to be a significant the diagnosis, the degree of diagnosis, and the for example, you might have, if someone would have gone to see their doctor last year, they would have found stage 1 cancer. However, they've waited, they haven't gone to the doctor. And so now they go to the doctor in 2022, and now they're faced with stage 3 cancer or stage 4 cancer. And so that severity of the diagnosis is much more, it's much more severe, and then it also means a lot more costly. So there's a concern in the healthcare industry. Now, again, we don't know if it's going to materialize or not, but there's a concern that these this money that we didn't spend this year is just going to be, is delayed. We will need it next year, or we will need it in 23 or 24, right? So there's a concern that if we spend it now, we are going to be in a bad situation next year. Does that make sense?
No. But I guess I go back to the question is, so what we're saying is the first year budget possibly could affect the second year of the budget drastically in several millions of dollars in more debt, I guess. But it's a speculation, isn't it? I'm not for the budget office, so I don't know. But I know when you have money and you're reserved to use it. Now I know what we went through several years ago. I mean, it was hell. I share that one because we really got beat up from the legislature on that. No doubt about it. I mean, that's why they changed all the rules, that we have to jump through more hoops than we've ever jumped through just to use that revenue, even though it's earned, on our watch. But and I understand their reserve about using it, but now it seems like our people are suffering now, and in 2 years, if we don't do something, it seems like they're going to be suffering in the second year too. Is that what we're thinking? I don't know.
Michelle Kelly here. I guess I have just a follow-up as well to Mr. Bailey. And I might be wrong, so please correct me, but I think through the meeting this morning, we've kind of talked about PEBP not being able to use the CARES Act money. That was like 3-point-something million, and it been taken by another agency. I think there's reserves that are actually being used for the employer subsidy or share holiday as well. And so I guess I just wanted to express a little bit of frustration that the reserves that are building up are really quick to be taken by the state, if you will, to be used. And I'm not, this is not about who needs it more, but they're pretty quick to be taken by the state for use in other places that need it. Meanwhile, our employees' plan design has really been impacted and isn't kind of benefiting from those reserves. And so if the reserves are lower, if the trend is lower than expected, then we end up with more and more reserves that just get taken by the state. And so I guess and I'm sure staff and everyone has worked really hard on this, but it just seems that the balance always tends to be given to the employer rather than the balance given to the employee. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I just wanted to put it out there. And then we've talked a lot about the trend, but I'm not sure we were told what trend was built into the rates by Aon. So what trend has been built into what we're seeing now? And I'll end there. Thank you.
So for the record, Laura Rich, I'll start out with clarifying. We did receive CARES Act funding. We received $5.7 million of CARES Act funding. The comment I made this morning in the executive officer report is that we're not looking at seeking additional money from CARES Act. So that's a finite bucket of money. And, there's a new stimulus. And so if we do get anything, it would be from that new stimulus, not from additional CARES Act money, because that is dwindling. But we did receive $5.7 million for that. The second part of your question was right about the excess. We're trying to, I think the goal here from staff is to, on one hand, be fiduciarily responsible and also protect members, because should we reinstate, should we recommend, first of all, this is all on the legislature at this point. It's not really a on the PEB board. This is something that the legislature could do, but say we reinstate everything and we use the projected excess, which doesn't necessarily exist yet. But let's say that we're instructed to do that. If these costs snowball into 22 and we see higher than projected trend, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and then reduce benefits again, or increase premiums very significantly, because in 23 we have no ability to adjust the employer subsidy. So what we're trying to do is maybe buy time, and in November, potentially, depending on what happens with the new stimulus money, depending on how trend looks like when the board meets in November, I mean, my hope is that Christmas is going to come early for PEB in November, because we're going to have a lot more information, and we may have a little bit of money to spend depending on what utilization is looking like. But I think this early in the game, it's a risk we're taking. So I think we're trying to level out the risk.
This is Laura Freed. I have some information for the board members that perhaps will answer Michelle Kelly's question. And Laura Rich and Stephanie Messier, correct me if I say the wrong numbers here, please. Aon's original trend for 2022, as I understand it, was 4.75% for medical and 8% for prescription. After the claims suppression was accounted for, I have 2.75% medical trend and 7% RX. Now let's compare that to what's built into GovRec. My understanding is that we have 2.35% medical trend in both 22 and 23, actually, and 7% RX. So what I think I hear the staff saying is that we are essentially expecting, even though we don't know how long claim suppression will last, and we're guessing maybe towards the end of the calendar year, but who knows, that's going to boomerang back on us in plan year 23. And so we're saving excess cash for a rainy day. Is that it, kind of? Without, we're saving excess cash for a rainy day, knowing that we kind of run the risk of getting yelled at by the legislature because we have excess cash.
So, Laura Rich, for the record, yes, it's not so much for a rainy day. Yes, it is to expect a potential boomerang, because if that boomerang does happen, depending on the degree, right? So if it comes back, and let's say that those costs are, again, it goes back to the matrix, right? Of what is the likelihood of this scenario? So are we going to have all these claims that didn't happen in plan year 21? Are they all going to materialize in 22 and 23? Are they only some of them going to materialize? Or is it that we're going to have that and more because of the delays in care and the more aggressive diagnosis and high cost diagnosis? And so it depends on how this plays out. And so by recommending that, we have this excess bucket that we know in one way, shape, or form is going to boomerang back, but we just don't know to what degree, to allocate or to use this all in, or to recommend using it when we don't have a plan B in place for 23. So 23 trend is the same as 22 trend. It's still that, you know, the medical is, you know, that 2.5, and so if we see trend come in at 6-7%
Right.
in 23,
Yeah.
that is going to be, we're going to be in a bad predicament at that point, because we will have to cut benefits yet again or raise premiums very significantly.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I talked over you. I apologize. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. This is Laura Fried. That if we have 2.35% medical trend in FY23, and it's 8-10% higher than that. I think Stephanie might have mentioned even, you know, five as in a normal world, and then another 5 from, you know, boomeranging claims or demand. Then that equals rate shock in the second year of the biennium.
Marcia Urban. Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Marcia Urban, for the record. I was wondering, can we use a portion of that excess cash, discretionary funds, whatever you want to call it, so that we can maybe make those benefits, and I'm talking about and I'm blanking on it now because my dogs were just barking, I had to keep them quiet. But you know, for the, so that when they go in the hospital, they're not spending as much money. Can we use some of those funds for that? You've already said that if we get any of the other funds from the CARES Act or, you know, whatever, the federal government, it is very easy to put back long-term disability and insurance and HRA. Can we use just a portion of it? Let's face it, we're in a state that is a gambling state. Can we just kind of gamble a little bit to help people so that if they go in the hospital, they are not in such dire straits?
I think you, so this is Laura Fried. I think you mean out of pocket max?
That's it.
Yeah, okay.
The dogs are still barking.
So this is Laura Rich. That goes back to what I alluded to earlier, that's part of plan design built in the rates. If that was something that was done, and I guess let me answer your question. We can do it, but by we, I would say the legislature can do that. This is now, you know, on the legislature to consider and decide through the budget process. I think that at this late in the game, the board making a decision like this would, it would be circumventing the legislative process and would probably not, at the 11th hour to make changes like this. Not only is it not on the agenda today, but it would be very difficult for PEB and the legislature to then go back to the drawing board and figure out what exactly needs to happen. So there's definitely, we can recommend that to the legislature. That can be something that, you know, advocates are very, you know, can provide in public comment and things like that. But at this point, the board probably can't take action today for sure. But anything having to do with plan design is going to change rates. And so there is definitely concerns with that, because then again, you are looking at reducing the open enrollment window, and it's just not something that is recommended during this plan year because of just the amount of changes and the chaotic nature, this disruption to the membership. And I know it's frustrating, and we're dealing with a very, very tight timeline. And so you quickly run out of time to make very important decisions, but it is part of the insurance world. This is just how the insurance world works. And, it all goes around open enrollment and, building that plan in time for members to be able to enroll in a plan and to rate that plan accurately and price it accurately. So hopefully that makes sense, Marcia.
It makes sense, but I don't like it. Oh, this is Marcia Urban for the record.
This is Laura Fried. I have a question for the staff, and I think you guys will really not like me for asking this, but I feel like I need to. Has PEB been contacted by anyone in the legislative branch about utilizing excess reserves to make any kind of add backs in a way that would not disrupt these rates?
Laura Rich for the record. PEB has not been contacted per se. However, we have received a laundry list of questions from the legislature, and as a result of the budget presentations and follow-up questions as well.
Okay.
And so those questions that came in would definitely address some of that. I don't know if the legislators are able to, to gather that, something is, certain things are easier to reinstate than others. But again, we've been working with the LCB staff very closely.
Right.
And so I'm sure that has been communicated.
I understood. I was just trying to get a little bit better sense of the add backs that they might be contemplating in options. And I know you can't say that, and I'm sure I might even get emails from LCB staff after this, but I was, as board members, well, I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much.
So Tom Verducci for the record. So we have quarterly utilization reports that we can watch trends. The trend has been downward and it could change and, go upward. But don't we have a catastrophic reserve? I mean, we're already in a rainy day. We went through a major rainy day, and we've seen a lot of changes in the program. And, we're sitting on a lot of excess cash. And we have utilization reports coming in quarterly. Won't we be able to see the trend? And if it really does spiral in the wrong direction, isn't that the purpose of the catastrophic reserves?
Laura Rich for the record, it is the purpose of the catastrophic reserves, but remember you have to backfill them. If you use them, you backfill them. And so that again affects rates and affects the overall budget, because anything you use in catastrophic needs to be refilled. Those are required reserves.
Michelle Kelly for the record. Chair Fried, I actually have a question for you. During public comment, we heard several of the advocates ask about or ask the board to put a statement on record for the legislature kind of supporting add backs. And I'm just wondering, do you and staff see value in that? Is that overstepping our bound? I'm just trying to understand. That request came from a number of people. I don't know what it would look like. So it's just an exploratory question.
This is Laura Fried. Do I see value in that? I think the legislature would certainly listen to the board if the board spoke with one voice about plan design that it felt strongly about. But I also know that the legislature listens carefully to advocates and helps. they're more, those folks, you know, whether they're union folks or they're retiree organizations, are very, or faculty alliance folks, are very capable of speaking for themselves. And, you know, I also think that, you know, the board's decision last fall, or last late summer on plan design also sort of speaks for itself. You know, I mean, the example everyone continues to cite is, you know, when we were, you know, faced with some terrible choices last July, August, to have to cut up to 12% in subsidy dollars, we reduced the long-term disability from 60% to 50%, and then in GovRec it was eliminated. I feel pretty confident that LCB fiscal staff has noted all of those things and would explain them to the members of the money committees. So I think it might have some value. Again, if we spoke with one voice about things, and to your question about process, you know, I suppose it could be part of a motion. I don't recall that the board has ever sent the legislature any formal letters or anything like that. But I do recall that board members, past board chairs, have gone to legislative hearings to sort of support the executive officer. But, you know, that usually, in my recollection, entailed going to support the governor's recommended budget, essentially. So I hope that helps. It was a bit rambling, unfortunately.
Chair Freed, Ms. Mooneyhan may want to weigh in on that too.
Yeah, sure.
That is agendized. I don't think that's there's any
fair point. Thank you.
Brandy Mooneyhan, for the record, I just unmuted myself for that exact reason. I would be concerned if any motion went beyond what is contemplated by the agenda, and I do not think the agenda contemplates board action making a statement like that. Obviously, individual board members can participate in the legislative process, and this could be agendized on a future agenda, but I do not think it's contemplated by today's agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. Every time I think I've dialed in my open meeting law compliance, I haven't. Thank you. Well, this is Laura Freed for the record. Well, option 2 gets us to, I was just doing a little bit of arithmetic here. I'm looking at the CDHP, gets us to just a 1.6% increase over FY21 in FY22 for the participant premium. It's a 0.3% increase for employee plus child and a 4.4% increase for employee plus family. For the non-Medicare retirees, it's a 0.3% increase over the current plan year. And for retiree plus spouse, it's a 3.1% increase. So not bad overall. I don't feel great about using what is essentially one-time money for something that's ongoing, but I never have, but I do support option 2. I'll just say that.
Marcia Urban for the record. I just want to clarify one point. What we are voting on today is the rate. And that's it. We're not looking at what's been cut or what anything about benefits. All we're looking at is a monthly rate. Is that it? Okay, I just want to clarify.
It's Michelle Kelly here. If Chair Fried, you're looking for a motion, I'll make the motion that we accept staff's recommendation on the setting of the rates for 2022.
Okay. Do I have a second for that motion?
This is Betsy, and that's for option 2, correct?
Yes.
I second.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the motion is to accept the rate table for plan year 2022 as portrayed in option 2. That's page 3 and page 4 of the staff report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries. Oops, I unmuted myself. Motion carries, thank you. And I think we will see on April 6th how the legislature might change the plan design. I think we'll all be watching with great interest if they do. With that, let us go to agenda item 9, public comments, a second public comment period, and I will return to staff.
For those who have joined for public comment, your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number will be announced, and you will be advised that you may now make your comments. If you are calling in via telephone, please be sure to press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last 4 digits of 3048, please press *6 to unmute and make your comment. Caller with the last 4 digits 7832, please press *6 and make your comment. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. Caller Kent Irvin, please state and spell your name for the record and make your comment.
Good afternoon, Chair Fried, Executive Officer Rich, and committee members. This is Kent Irvin, K-E-N-T E-R-V-I-N for the Nevada Faculty Alliance. Thank you all for the detailed discussion today and your work. The outcome, of course, is what we expected from the agenda. I would like to comment on just one thing. It was stated earlier that there was no plan B for the second year of this biennium. Well, this biennium and this year has been different in a lot of ways. And a big difference is that the state has $2.95 billion funds coming in, which is greater than the loss of revenue because of COVID. And so there is a plan B. It's to backfill various budget holes with those federal funds, which we believe will largely be flexible for this kind of use. Now, the PEB board can't do that, obviously, I understand that. But what PEB can do at the instruction of the legislature is to anticipate those funds, that at least some of them will come in, use the excess reserves now to restore the benefits that can be restored as late as June is what I heard, and then backfill later when the American Rescue Plan Act funds do come in, if they are even needed. The range we heard of possible trend next year is from a -2 or 3% up to a positive 9 to 10%. And Aon went right in the middle pretty much at, I didn't get a composite number, but 2.4 for medical and 7 for prescriptions. So that probably averages out to 3 or 4%. So right in the middle of that range. We could end up given Aon's predictions, with more excess reserves next year, or we could be a few percentage points, maybe up to 5 at the high end of that range on the other end. But either way, the American Rescue Plan funds are coming in. They've been signed into law. They will come to the state in some form. And this is a really very small portion of those funds that could be used for this purpose. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last 4 digits of 3048, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last 4 digits of 4404, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, good afternoon. I'd like to thank Chair and respected committee members and Laura Reed and Laura Rich and her staff as well. This is Kevin Ramp representing AFSCME Local 4041 on behalf of active state employees. Again, we would appreciate everybody that had discussions today in regards to trying to restore the benefits and thinking outside the box and coming up with various ideas that PEB could eventually call back a meeting based off of the legislative response. I do think it's a good idea for every single board member to reach out individually or as a group. I know that wasn't part of the agenda, but that could be done. I think that that's also a responsibility of board members to do whatever they can to ensure that the state employees are well taken care of, especially during a time of crisis, which we are in. The concern was going into this with the pandemic that we would have all these shortfalls. That is no longer the case. The money is going to be there. Let's get this money set aside for PEB. Let's advocate it through the advocacy groups, but the PEB boards needed to all do it together. This is a team effort to get these state employees restored rates and restored benefits. We appreciate everything that you guys have done and all the hard work. But again, this is not over. And there's a lot of other groups competing for those funds. So we want to make sure if PEB board members could reach out, I strongly encourage that, even if you want to do it individually. This is an opportunity to get those funds and to start restoring some of these cuts going into the next plan year and beyond. So with that being said, there's a few items or a few options, even if they don't. Let's take a look at some of these, these excess reserves. We have great opportunity here. We just need to set up the meetings, make sure it's agendized properly, and make some decisions to give the state employees back what they deserve. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last 4 digits 5227, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute.
Greetings, Chair Fried, members of the PEB Board, and Executive Director Laura Rich. My name is Sheila Salehian, S-H-E-I-L-A, Salehian, S-A-L-E-H-I-A-N, and I'm a prior Nevada State employee. I'd like to comment on 2 items related to pre-Medicare proposed retiree rates for the upcoming fiscal years. The first is the premium cost as outlined in the board packet. Second concern is with the interpretation of statutes by PEB staff for retiree premium subsidy qualification. The personal impact on myself and other unknowing public servants who moved from one Nevada public service employer to the state in 2012 or after, not realizing they will be giving up healthcare subsidies in retirement in the future. I'll start with the pre-Medicare unsubsidized healthcare cost concern. I'm a single mother and now looking at almost $900 a month to cover myself and my 2 children after working as a Nevada public servant for 10 years and having to take an unplanned early retirement. That is not sustainable given my pension. Unrelated but relevant to my point, I have already been paying almost $900 a month for COBRA for the past 16 months, as I was unexpectedly terminated from an unclassified position right before the pandemic hit. Please note that the healthcare exchange did not work for me, which is why I chose to stay on PEB coverage. The reason COBRA payments are related to my concern is because my 18-month COBRA coverage is ending and I'm being forced to take an early retirement to keep my health care coverage. After dealing with breast cancer last year, like the pandemic and unemployment wasn't bad enough, I paid over $24,000 in health care between my premiums and coinsurance. I fully expected my premiums to go down in retirement. My second concern, which is the crux of the issue for me and possibly impacts other state employees, is the PEB staff statutory interpretation that my continuation years of service, of public service in Clark County, do not count for the subsidy because of my state hire date. I have been very involved in watching PEB's activity through the years and did not interpret the PEB pre-retiree package, which I always read, to be interpreted in the way they apparently were meant to be read. My original hire date with Clark County was before January 1st, 2010, leading me to believe that I did qualify for a subsidy as it aligns to all PERS changes since the 2009 legislative session and beyond, which PEB had aligned with for many years. In summary, I started with Clark County in 2009 and moved to the state of Nevada to an unclassified deputy treasurer position under then Treasurer Kate Marshall. I was asked to start with a new pay period, which was January 9th, 2012. I literally left the county on a Friday and started with the state the following Monday. As noted earlier, I worked until 2019 when there was a change in administration. As you can imagine, finding a job in this pandemic has been extremely difficult. I did not have a break in service and I was a member of PERS and PEB. Now I'm being told I won't qualify. This is a personal impact of over $20,000 in premiums to me over the next 5 years. I did not plan on retiring, but I find myself in this position now. I don't think that was the intent of the legislature when the various bills were enacted throughout the years. Specifically, when employees move from county or other public service employers to the state, regardless of the number of years they serve at the state, they are still told they do not qualify for subsidy. I can assure you that I called PEB even before I started in 2012 to inquire about the health insurance and the impact of public service change in employment and was not told of this. In summary, PEB policy changes were not clearly communicated to impacted employees as required by statute. One such change was the 2016 NAC change to require employees to be vested to qualify for years of service subsidy consideration from when they came from other public employers. At this time, I would like the board to know that I'm asking the PEB board for a declaratory order concerning the applicability of this provision interpretation under NAC 287. I took the time to write a multiple-page submission outlining my concerns with the PEB communication and why I interpreted these changes through the years to not impact me, as I was initially hired prior to January 1st, 2010 by the county. Executive Director Laura Rich has this outlined. I'm asking the board to review my detailed position and concern with the statutorily required employee communication, which I do not think happened. I personally know a few state employees who do not understand that this is going to impact them in the same way it impacted me. I know from working for the state and supporting the College Savings Board that it's a lot of work, and interpreting statutory implications of bills is not an easy job and sometimes requires LCB consultation to understand the intent of the law. Therefore, I thank you for your time and future consideration of my appeal and consultation with LCB if that's what it takes to understand the changes that impacted employees after January 1st, 2012, if they came from the county or any other public service employer without a break in service. Thank you.
Caller Doug Unger, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and make your comment.
Doug Unger, D-O-U-G-U-N-G-E-R, President UNLV Chapter, Nevada Faculty Alliance, and Government Affairs Representative for Southern Nevada Faculty for the Alliance. I'd like to thank Chair Freed, Executive Officer Rich, and everyone on the board and PEB staff for all the work you've put in over this past very stressful year, and especially for the constructive discussion and tone of the discussion of today's board meeting. I just want to, for the record, enter an interpretation of the American Rescue Plan funding intentions so that we're all clear about what this money is for and how. And this is coming from the JD Supra website, which is a group of attorneys who interpret federal case law and is a highly respected venue. Point 1, to respond to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19 or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Point 2, to provide premium pay to eligible workers of the state, territory, or tribal government, metropolitan city, non-entitlement unit of local government, or county that are performing such essential work, or to provide grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers who perform essential work. Point 3, for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such state, territory, or tribal government, metropolitan city, non-entitlement unit of local government, or county due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Point 4, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Clearly, Nevada state employees fit point 2 and point 3 of the legal interpretation of the American Rescue Plan funding intentions. In fact, we should be first in the interpretation of this law, and restoration of PEB benefits should be a priority in the allocation of American Rescue Plan funds based on the intention and legal reading of the plan and of the federal legislation. So thank you very much, that we should all keep this in mind and do what we can to convince our legislature to really keep us in mind for restoring our benefits as practically as possible in the future. Thank you.
Caller with the name Patillo, please slowly speak and spell your full name and press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last 4 digits, 2237. Please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute.
I'm a single mother and now look.
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Marlene Lockard, Lockard, representing RPEN, Retired Public Employees of Nevada. I listened very carefully today with your discussion around excess reserves. And many of you know that this has been a topic of special interest to me since 2011. The question that I would like to put to staff is, what if there were no excess reserves as you originally predicted this year? If we did not have those excess reserves, PEB would be required to go to the catastrophic reserves that are put in place for just this kind of emergency if we have the suppressed claims come in as anticipated. The excess reserves since 2011 are outside of the statutorily required reserves. And so it seems to me that we're not using the proper safeguards that were put in place and required by law to meet this anticipated claim filing. With the other revenues coming in, the short-term use of excess reserves to prevent any hardship to the employees seems like a golden opportunity to prevent this interim hurt to those employees. So I would hope the board and the staff would revisit, along with the legislature, on the use of the excess reserves. And then I also had a question that the staff indicated that they decided not to apply for additional CARES fund funding. And my question is, why? We know the issues facing the board and the budget and just curious why you would not have pursued that opportunity to defray some of the, again, detrimental changes in the budget. Thank you.
Caller with the last four digits, 7947, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute.
Hi, my name is Clarabelle, and it's spelled C as in cat, L as in lion, A as in apple, R as in rabbit, I as in ice cream, B as in boy, E as in elephant, L as in lion, Zephania, Z as in zebra, E as in elephant, C as in cat, E as in elephant, N as in Nancy, A as in apple. And I am calling to support PEB doing what's necessary to be able to do an emergency meeting again if necessary. I'm also the AFSCME Local 4041 PEB co-chair, and I have been working in Reno for 11 years for the state, going on 10 years as a state employee. So I am really very invested in seeing this because as I've come in, you know, comparatively, we have not kept up with our benefits when we're looking across other public services like the county, the city. And it's just sad that we keep on chiseling away at our benefits. So trying to keep the rates flat as the governor intended is super important. Doing what we can to have an emergency meeting so that we, in the middle of the pandemic, as state employees who have been working hard throughout this whole period, are not always the ones carrying the burden for the state. It is the risk we take as state employees. We realize that we're dependent on the funding that the state gets, and so we appreciate that. This is a hard time for the state, especially since we depend so much on tourism, but we have to do better for our employees. This board has to do better for its members. So I just urge you to continue doing what's possible in your powers to set up a better system for the members that you represent. I appreciate all that you do because I know it's not easy to make the decisions that you make and the time that you contribute to this. And I appreciate that many of you are also state employees, as I am. So I appreciate you taking your time out of your day and participating because it's not easy to make some of these decisions. So I just want to thank you for everything that you are doing, and I appreciate the hard decisions that you have to make. But keep helping state employees. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last four digits, 7832, please slowly speak and spell your name for the record and press *6 to unmute. Madam Chair, that concludes our public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we have come to the end of our business. I want to thank the board members for their participation today. I want to thank the public for their participation, and of course, thank the PEB staff for their continued hard work. It is 12:44 p.m. and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.